If you could all please take your seats. There is another anteroom over there with a simulcast that will be playing, so if you want to sit in there or in here. I call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education, Community Unit School District 201, being held Tuesday, March 9, 2010. Roll call, please, Ms. McMahon.
Ms. Casey?
Here.
Mr. Charleston?
Here.
Mrs. Charlton?
Here.
Ms. Kelly?
Here.
Mrs. Luback?
Here.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas?
Here.
If you could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping matters. There were 50 packets made, and I know Judy has graciously made some more public packets. But if anybody could share, if we're out, thank you for making those copies, Judy. Also, before we begin, I would like to read a statement, and then if any other board members have anything to say. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to come to this board meeting. I have been getting many phone calls and emails about the topic of budget cuts and cost containment. People have heard all sorts of rumors floating around, and tonight I would like to calm everyone's fears and say that these are just rumors. The board has not yet approved any budget cuts, nor have we approved any riffing or firing of our teachers. In fact, final cuts for next year won't be made for many months. And I, for one, will not recommend or support any large cuts for next year. I will do everything in my power to instead make the minimal cuts necessary and to take the time during the next year to listen to all of the concerns of the people of this district in order to make wise decisions in 2011. Many of the cuts in front of us today are strategic in nature, and they cannot be done until we revisit our strategic plan, which we will be starting in August. I do this because I feel we are simply not prepared to make large cuts. We do not have enough facts. And we have barely begun to hear from the parents, the teachers, and the administrators of the district. Until we do so, we cannot possibly know which cuts to approve or which to oppose. Besides all of these reasons, this is the right thing to do. Our community must have a long series of conversations in order for the board to make good financial decisions. When you elected a new school board last year, you elected a board dedicated to open discussion. Therefore, the timeline that this board has set up for this purpose is as follows. Tonight, we will begin to discuss these cuts that we have been given by the administration. March 16th, there will be a special open board meeting to further discuss these cuts at 7 o'clock here at the Village Hall. March 23rd is our regularly scheduled board meeting with more discussions, again at 7 o'clock at the Village Hall. Sometime in April, when we've had the time to digest all of this information, we are looking to have a public forum. Then we are into April, May, and June before any hard and fast cuts are finalized. Thank you. Does anybody else want to make any comments?
I'm not sure that that's an accurate statement. I do believe that we have to make some decisions before June. Is that not correct, Dr. Ball?
With regard to staffing, right, if there's the potential for any cut to be made, and as we've talked with the union officials, the administrators, that if the board has any potential of making those cuts, we'll provide those RIF notices, et cetera, at the March 23rd meeting, and then the board will have to ultimately make a decision which of those people they wish to retain and hire back.
Okay. And that's because of the contract?
Tenured teacher, well, it's not the contract, it's actually state law.
State law, okay.
State law requires that, tenured teachers be given 60 days, non-tenured teachers 45 days, and then support staff different amounts as well. And 12-month employees have certain, deadlines that have to be met to inform them if they're not going to be back next school year.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, are there any public comments at this time? Okay, thank you. Let's move to the first item under administration policy, first readings and adoptions. The chair will entertain a motion to waive the reading of policies.
I would like to pull out one policy for discussion.
Okay. Policy 220, 240, 2100, 2110, 2240, 2260, 340, 440, 4100, 590, 5220, and 7190, and to approve the adoption of policies 220, 240, 2100, 2110, 2240, 2260, 340, 440, 4100, 590, 5220, and 7190 as presented. And you wanted to pull out?
I would like to discuss for a minute 2110.
Do you want to do that now?
That's fine with me. It's my understanding from the last policy committee meeting that there was some discussion about this policy regarding term limits for board officers, and I wondered if any member of the policy committee would like to elaborate on the discussion.
Sure. Joel and I had discussed the idea of changing the term limits for the officers from 2 years to 1, and that was actually something that I had brought up. And the reason that I had brought that up was, it was my thinking that because there are 7 board members and our term of office is 4 years, I thought that changing the term limit would give all of the board members an opportunity to, at one time or another, to be able to serve in the capacity of one of those positions. So that was something that Joel and I thought would be something that the full board should maybe discuss. So I'm just bringing that up for discussion.
Right. Actually, we disagreed in the policy committee, so I think it's best once we have a disagreement, we just bring it before the full board. I feel that the 2-year term is adequate, and in fact, we always talk about this learning curve that is necessary for positions, and I think it's important to not have so much turnover in your officers, and it just is going to make for more stability in board leadership.
Well, that's certainly a pro for leaving it at 2 years. And as I mentioned, one of the reasons for changing it to 1 year is because of the fact that our terms are just 4 years, and it would just give more of the board members an opportunity to experience the position. So,
I'd just like to bring up the possibility of, I agree with Joel, actually, that there is a large learning curve, and I would like to propose the possibility of there being a stipulation about the board president having served in another office or having some experience before holding that office. Did you guys ever discuss anything like that?
That was nothing that we talked about at the policy meeting.
no, but that's something that we could certainly discuss and
I
consider.
don't know if would that conflict at all with school code, because it kind of talks about election of officers in school code, doesn't it?
In what regard? Which part of
In
it?
regard to, how they're nominated and seated. And, I'm not,
But the
off the top
policy-
of my head, I don't know. but-
Right, but we can change policy in terms of how we want to have the terms. And, I mean, the reason you guys, or the policy committee goes over policy is to review what's being recommended by the IASB, but as you've said before, kind of tailor things to our own district. So I just thought I'd bring that up because I think it's really important to have some experience before taking on that position. And I haven't, delineated specifics about what that experience should be, but I think that some experience is pretty vital. So does anybody else have a comment? Otherwise, we can move on. I just wanted to bring it forward.
What's in front of us, is this what the IASB has suggested? This is their suggested language here?
Right.
that's in front of us, right, Kathy?
Correct, but
Joan?
as
Since
Joan,
it's in front of us, I'm not denying any of their
I'm just asking.
bold print suggestions, but since it's in front of us and we haven't looked at this policy in a while, I wanted to bring that up as a suggestion.
right, because as Joel mentioned, one of the things that he would like for us to do is take a look at the policies and customize them to fit our district, not just this policy, but all of them. And I think what Linda is saying is that maybe this policy could use some customization if the board feels that that's something that is important that we would like to consider.
I mean, personally, I think I'd like to approve the changes in front of us, but if at a future moment, the notion that that you brought up is one of effectively just an annual organizational meeting. And rather than have that be a mandatory, just in terms of speaking about 201, rather than have that be a mandatory annual organizational meeting, I'd rather structure something that was the opposite of mandatory, and I'm blanking.
Optional?
Optional, thank you.
Well,
Just something where if a majority of the board or something like that wants to have an organizational meeting at that point, whether it's in May or whether it's in June, but we can stipulate that as an optional, sort of feature for boards if they so desire. But I can't, I don't know that I'd be supportive of a mandatory one every year.
I think one problem with it, I mean, if you go back to the last election, the previous board could have made such a change at that time just in an effort to not have a new member be board president, and I don't think that's entirely fair either, especially in a situation where you do have a turnover.
Well, it
with
wasn't
4 new members.
suggested. It wasn't
Right,
suggested at that
I'm just
time.
saying, you're kind of setting the stage for a future board as they come together as an entire body, after the election, so.
Okay, well, you know what, it's fine, we can move on. I think, it goes back to points I've made in the past, which is that we are an entire board, and every member's vote has equal weight, and so it's not about anybody having more power or more control. It's about running meetings and communicating and all of those kinds of things. And sometimes I just think that without any experience, it's difficult to serve in that capacity. But I'm happy to move on.
Okay, then the chair will entertain a motion, as I previously read.
So moved?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Okay. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the textbook series for 2010-2011. Any discussion on that before I read this?
How do we fund these?
effectively, we fund them through our own education fund because there no longer is a state textbook loan program.
Okay.
These textbooks are available for somebody to review if a community
They're
member want to come and
they're
look
at
at
the
them.
district office for anybody who would want to review them.
How much did we spend on textbooks for this school year?
How much have we? I can tell you what we budgeted,
Yeah, just-
$134,000.
$134,000. Okay. Is this the full scope of sort of textbook recommendations for the next,
For this, at this point,
for the
yes.
next school year?
Yeah. There'll probably be a few other changes at the high school, but they'll be relatively minimal.
Okay.
This is the only large-scale scope of change.
So on a net basis, what we will spend,
You would have to ask Christy Civic, because I am not part of that.
I mean, again, some of the monies for textbooks are also used for computer software and other things that are used systemically throughout the curriculum.
okay. But this, and the question I'm asking is, on the margin, This isn't adding $60,000
No.
to some, because we spend money every year on textbooks anyway, and other years more than others, and.
Oh, yeah,
some year
we
less, so,
don't
yes.
spend a set amount. Since we've adopted the curriculum advisory committee process, the textbook recommendations for textbook series always come through that process.
Okay.
And so at this point, the reading process has gone through. Math didn't choose new textbooks at the elementary level, but did at the junior high school level. And then science has made changes last year. So social studies is sort of the last of the large 4 departments
Okay.
to look at textbook upgrades. And again, they're pretty systemic changes to the social studies curriculum. So the changes that we want to make couldn't really be made with the existing sets of textbooks. Right? And primarily because of the changes at the junior high level with the change to an ancient history, world history, U.S. history approach, as opposed to simply a year of world history and then 2 years of American history at the junior high.
The last time we changed that curriculum was how long ago?
Did it change the curriculum?
That book.
It's in here, I think it's 95.
Yeah, it would depend upon the class.
1990.
Did you say 95, Maureen?
I saw
It's actually
1990.
in there somewhere.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, the main text was 95.
I guess my point was, it's social studies, and for it to not be a current book makes it a difficult.
that would be a problem, yes.
How does this year's textbook grouping differ from years in the past? Is this the amount that's normally done? Is there any sort of normalcy? Is this?
No, there's no real normalcy. It's tied to the curriculum advisory process and then any individual sort of course changes at the high school level.
Okay.
And so, the math textbook series, the reading textbook series are larger and more expensive in scope than social studies, for instance.
And then just in terms of the text for we added the course, or course offering for
The Chicago
the Chicago
course? Yes.
course. Sufficient enrollment to purchase those texts?
Oh, absolutely. There'll be, I think, 3 or 4 sections of Chicago history.
Very good.
I want to say 3, but it could be 4.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's substantial enrollment in that course.
Any other comments? Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the adoption of the following textbook programs for 2010 to 2011. 1, Social Studies Alive, Regions of Our Country. 2, World History, Ancient through Early Modern Times. 3, Metropolis of the Mid-Continent. 4, Sociology, A Down-to-Earth Approach. 5, City of Big Shoulders, A History of Chicago. Roll call, please. I'm sorry.
Ms. Casey?
Yes.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes.
Ms. Charlton?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Mrs. Lubeck?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The next item is superintendent's report.
The first item there, we received recognition from the State Board of Education, again, that Manning now for the 2nd year in a row has earned an Academic Excellence Award based on the ISAT testing. And basically, that requires that students have for 3 consecutive years, 80% of the students meet or exceed reading and math standards, and that in other ways it meets AYP. And so for the past 4 years now, Manning has had, that criteria where they've had 80% of its students or more exceeding in reading and math. And in fact, reading this year was just under 90%, and in math is about 95% of kids met or exceeded standards. I think one thing to point out, and again, part of it is because of the way the state tests are skewed to make it much easier at the elementary level to exceed standards, for instance, than at the high school level. Of the 438 schools that received the recognition, there were only 6 high schools in the state, 92 middle schools, and then 340 elementary or K-8 schools received academic excellence. And again, the other key is that very few of those, only a quarter of those schools effectively, were schools that had 15% or more of their students from low-income backgrounds. And so I think that's a stronger achievement that Manning is actually one of those 122 schools that has a poverty rate over 15%. And then the other award, we also received recognition from the school search group that we received, again, their Bright Red Apple Award for educational excellence. And I believe that's about the 10th year in the row that we've received that. Again, about 1 in 10 school districts in Illinois receives that award. So, moving on to, I just want to make sure you're aware of the presentation at the high school about a week ago from Robert Renteria, the author of From Barrio to the Boardroom. He came in really to speak to about 400 students at the high school, sort of about hard work and determination as the keys to success. Then after that large group session, he did a smaller group, sort of writer's workshop, and Amy Quattrone, Jamie Mahmood, Michelle Therese, at least 1 or 2 of them I saw here in the audience tonight, were very involved in putting that together. They worked with the Westmont Public Library, and I would also like to put a call out for Uncle Bub's Barbecue for helping to sponsor the event. Students seem to react very positively to his message. So I thought it was a very nice experience. I know a few of you were able to involve. They had a reception after that second presentation, and that some of you were able to go to that. So I've also included a copy of information from the schedule from the Institute Day that we had about 2 weeks ago now. We had a number of our staff members did presentations. Some of our reading specialists, our librarians, all did presentations, as well as we brought a couple people in from the outside. Nancy Battaglia, our technology director, did one of the presentations. And then we also did some work, for instance, on assessment and final exams and working on that process at the high school. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Oklahoma. I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to see the musical this year, but as always, the Fine Arts Department just did a fabulous job with Oklahoma. My kids,
This is where I feel like saying oak.
don't, please, because my kids haven't stopped doing that. My kids have been singing Oklahoma songs to me for about a week now. So I can't wait for them to find something else to grab onto, because, it's a good musical, but anything, doesn't, you don't want to listen to the same CD 500 times in a row. But again, congratulations to Grant and Matt and all the people involved in putting the musical together. Any questions?
Well, I'll say the junior high is having a play on March 18th and 19th, so Cinderella at the junior high, again, March 18th and 19th at 7 o'clock. So come on down for that, too. And the play was great, Grant. Anything else? Okay, moving along to
Yes.
okay, board reports. Any?
Just want to mention that the Westmont High School girls flag team will be down at Champaign this weekend for state. So good luck, girls. And if anybody feels like making the trek down to Champaign-Urbana, they'll be performing probably sometime around 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday.
Thank you. Anything else? No? All right. Moving along to finance.
Okay, Marie, this is where, before we start this, and Linda, with your, with your indulgence, we have a very large crowd, and I'm especially appreciative of it. What I wanted to do was, before we start the details of our conversation, I wanted to contextualize why we're here, what the goal is, and sort of what we're building towards, so that, again, people can hear it again, absorb it again, and understand what we're trying to accomplish. So, for that, we got an email from a parent earlier today, and I especially appreciated it because she asked a question that I have no doubt is on a lot of people, or several questions. She made a few statements and asked a couple questions that I have no doubt are on people's minds. Some comments. She said our priorities need to be in order, and she's absolutely right. Our priorities do need to be in order. They need to be kid-centered and kid-focused. She said, sort of jokingly, she noted that her rose-colored glasses recommendations and sort of a wish list of things that didn't have to be touched. And we all have a wish list of things that we would love to see not touched. But we'll talk about that later. She referenced the referendum now is not the answer. That's that's obviously a very emotion-filled word and will take so much more work than just now. So any sort of thought of that is nowhere near now. But that's if there's going to be that conversation, that's a longer-term strategic conversation that needs to be addressed in the context of a strategic plan that incorporates why we would do that and what it would buy. And lastly, she asked, and she pointed out that obviously so much of this is about the economy and how the economy has squeezed our revenues. And she asked this question, why can't we wait? The economy will get better. And it absolutely will at some point get better. But I really appreciate her asking that question because I'm quite certain that there's a host of people who would love to know why we can't wait. So I want to touch on that. Our objectives as a school board. I'm going to oversimplify our mission statement for a second. Priority number one, I think, is to provide a very high-quality education for every child that's in 201. Every board member that you see at this table has children, a child or children, in our schools. We are as keenly aware of what our cuts mean as everyone out there. Secondly, and priority 1A is to do so without going broke. A high-quality education without going broke. So in that context, how did we get here? And let me give you, and I see a handful of guys who I know are numbers guys, so I'm going to throw out some numbers again, and I'm going to ask you to just kind of chew on them, and then if you have questions or want to recapitulate them at any point in the future, feel free to talk to me or to Maureen. Our operating budget this year budgeted a 380, we have revenues of approximately $23.5 million across 5 buildings, 1,500 enrolled kids plus some other kids, so call it 1,700 kids in our buildings on any given day. So $23.5 million in revenues and about $23.9 budgeted in expenses. 18 million of our revenues is taxes, and taxes are not growing next year. State aid, general state aid, is about $750,000.
605.
650.
605.
605. Okay. I could have swore you said, yeah, okay.
That's what she wishes it was.
Okay. When we talked about our PMA projections, the 5-year projections at the last meeting, we simply put, I think everybody in here is aware that the state of Illinois is effectively insolvent. We will lose, for at least a while, and perhaps permanently, as much as $450,000 of that revenue every year. So without a growing, so next year, our projection says that our revenue actually is going to be slightly less than we have this year. Take that $23.9 million in expenses for a moment. 17 million of that, we're a people organization. 80% of our costs are people. $17 million of our $24 million budget is people, salaries and benefits. Most of our people, the vast majority of our people, are covered by contracts that guarantee increases in pay and guarantee that we have to cover benefits at some very large level. If that grows only so much as 4%, a low number, that's $700,000. If nothing else grows, then our expenses next year go from 23.9 to 24.6. And our revenue is less than 23.5. Suddenly, next year, we're staring at a $1.2 million, 1.2 to 1.5 million dollar deficit. What's the metric where that matters? Do we have that money? Do we have that money? The lowest point every year in a school district for cash on hand is May 31st. The reason for that is we collect taxes in June and September. And then we spend that money over the course of the year up through the next June, and then we get another big slug of taxes. So when you see a June 30th financial statement for our district, it always has this healthy cash balance. But it's because we've gotten our first tax payment for the next year, effectively. So May 31st is what's called our low point balances. This year, our low point balance will be somewhere in the range of, depending on whether or not the state makes our payments on time, $3 million on the high side and $2.5 million probably on the low. So if we bleed cash at the rate of $1.2 million a year, and we have, say, $2.5 million as our low point balance at the end of this year, if we do nothing, we will run out of money in 2 years. At that point, we will have to borrow money to make payroll. Boy, I hope some of these numbers are getting through to people, because if you do nothing and you wait, that gap only gets larger because expenses keep growing. And even if our revenues grew in the next years at the same rate as our expenses, because the expenses are so much higher, the hole gets deeper. This is where we are. This is where we are. Last meeting, the 5-year PMA projections were presented, and we talked about effectively running out of money in 2 years. So doing nothing, sadly, is not an option. Not an option. We've articulated a goal or a framework of trying to identify cuts in a way that keeps us solvent through 2015. That's about 5 years. Why 2015? Well, 2015, we will have tackled a couple different contracts. You know, again, people are our biggest expense, and so we'll have had an opportunity to deal with some of those issues. At 2015, there will be a decision that has to be made about working capital bonds and refunding those bonds and the use of those proceeds. And now I'm getting into a little bit of esoteric stuff about how the district finances work. But 2015 is a date that offers a handful of options to the district to rejigger the way it structures its financial pie. So 2015 became, is an important date because there's a lot of important decisions that can be made around then to get us back to a point where we are truly a balanced budget district. I mentioned state aid and the problems with that. I'm going to throw something out here. Eventually, we have to create a district that looks a lot more like Hinsdale 86 or 181, that's effectively self-funded. Right now, 88% of our revenues are local revenues. That means 12% are not. We need to get to 95, 96. Because if we don't, we have to live with the vagaries of the state. And that's just untenable. It's terribly untenable. It's untenable for you, it's untenable for us. That's a longer-term proposition. There are a series of decisions that need to be made to get there. And we're not going to make all those decisions tonight. So the last thing I wanted to mention is The numbers that the PMA models, throw out as being necessary to get us to 2015 is somewhere in the $1 million range for cuts this year. And then we have to do something else next year. And in the PMA presentation, we talked about grade level centers, and that's going to be a longer conversation as well. We're certainly not going to tackle that, I don't think, this time around. So that's going to be a longer conversation. But that's the scope of cuts that we have to find. And again, doing nothing is not an option. It's not an option. And we're a people organization, and unfortunately, that means that we're going to lose some people and some programs. And it means that we need to talk about this strategic vision for being self-funded and staffing the right programs and staffing the right people. So, context. No matter what we do here tonight, we will continue to bleed. We will continue to be negative. The goal is just to figure out a way to keep enough blood to last us to 2015, or at least 2013 or 2014. Somewhere in there, our models will clearly have to tweak every year, and we continue to look at those models every year and continue to look at the underlying assumptions and all the things that go into that. But the point is, at some point, there's no more blood. And at that point, it's too late. And then we look like so many other districts that are cutting way deep, way too far, with way too little conversation. So, with that said, we're 380 negative. We'll be $1.2 million negative next year. And I will suggest that we need to find about $700,000 to $900,000, depending on how strongly we feel about things. But we need to find that amount of money in budget cuts. And I'm sorry I took so long, but I felt compelled to put things in context.
Thank you, Dan. All right. Do you want to start this?
Sure. If you take a look at what I wrote in the cost containment options there, again, the first paragraph sort of summarizes to some extent what Dan just said, with the addition that, as we've talked about making cuts, my original recommendations last summer were that we would probably have to make, $500,000 to $600,000 worth of additional cuts based upon what we did or did not get in state aid. As Dan said, we're theoretically about $400,000 short of being a balanced budget this year, but in reality, we know that the state is going to be late in payments again this year, and that's going to move that to probably at least the $500,000 level as far as a real negative to our budget this year. Just to make sure that everything is as good as possible from the PMA standpoint, our financial projections. Maureen's contacted the ISB that have a separate group that come in and do financial projections. Again, their process is a little different in trying to make sure that we bring forward to the board that to either confirm or to challenge some of the assumptions made by PMA. Talk about the issue about grade level centers. For instance, clearly there are some economies of scale that are gained from grade level centers. However, right now, Miller is a Title I school, and we're not certain. We've still asked, Christie Civic is talking to the state as far as what the answer is will we lose Title I funding potentially by going to grade level centers, because then the poverty rate for both schools would be less than 40%. It'd still be over 30 in both schools, but it would be less than 40%.
40% is the hurdle for Title I?
Well, that appears to be accurate, but this, the state occasionally changes the way they calculate that. It used to be they looked at just within a county, the lowest percentage, which schools had the highest rate, and it didn't really, there wasn't necessarily that clear threshold.
Okay.
So,
Does that happen to be part of the money we're not getting paid for?
no, that's actually federal money, and that, relatively speaking, the federal money does come, because the state has to get it to us by, the end of the federal fiscal year. So
What percentage is that?
it's about, what, $300,000?
Title I is
100,
196.
sorry, 176, so.
96.
96, so,
96 per year?
yes, and it's changed, it went up, actually.
It actually went down. It was 220 last year, so it's 196.
One year remember we got more a couple years ago?
240 one year. I think that was 2 years ago.
Yeah, and then it went down. So, but again, the key there is that would have some, so there's some offsetting to the cost savings potentially of grade level centers, though, it's still a net savings, but it's not as much of a net as it could be potentially. And I don't, again, Christie's got to talk to the people from the state and see if they're, if there's a way around that potentially. And again, before we start talking about individual cuts, I have to, go back to what I shared with you last board meeting from 1985 and 86. Is this district made a lot of cuts then in a very similar circumstance, and most of those programs were never brought back. Right? So for instance, we used to have, 4 grounds crewmen. We cut 2 of them in 1985, and we have 2 now. We've never, never come back. And I know that there are complaints occasionally about the athletic fields not being, put together correctly, et cetera. And that's a direct result of those cuts. The high school newspaper was cut as a program, and it's never been brought back. And so that's kind of where we sit. The board's direction to us as a staff at the last meeting was to come up with approximately, $1.2 million worth of cuts, enough to be solvent through 2015. So again, I went back to the staff, went to the list of all of the suggestions that were brought forward, and that I shared with you all last month. They're actually in your orange folder again. And then we sat down with the administrative team and the presidents of all the employee unions. And if you look the first 2 pages there, you have the spreadsheet that's baseline model and option A through G. It really shows that if we're going to make $1.2 million worth of cuts, for instance, and this assumes state aid is flat, right? These are the reductions we need to make. Again, option A would keep all of the elementary class sizes effectively the same, except it would raise the class size from 25 to 28 for K2 classes. Oh, excuse me, and then 30 for 3-5. Right? So there'd be some increase in where we are right now. We're looking at trying to add, depending upon the board's thoughts, potentially making $120,000 worth of additional fees effectively to enhance our revenues. And that list is also on the potential revenue enhancements it's in the spreadsheets behind this. Right? So assuming that the board chooses option A and that we get all the state funding that we're supposed to get, and we cut everything that's on that original list 1, which is a list of about $660,000 worth of potential cuts, that as we met with the administrators and the unions, these are sort of all the issues that were on we came to consensus. We most likely have to make all of those to try to remain solvent. Then, if the board also wants to raise fees, as articulated on the back of that page, the board then has to come up with about $200,000 worth of additional cuts beyond that. And again, those cuts are listed on the second page as potential budget cuts. And there's, again, there's about $880,000 worth of potential cuts identified there. And some of those people, every one of those is going to have some programmatic impact. Right? But if you look at the difference between the baseline model, where if you keep the class sizes relatively the same, you remain as neighborhood schools, you have to cut about $200,000. Now, if we don't get our state aid, and we might get some idea tomorrow when the governor makes his budget address, I know Maureen is eager to watch that, or listen to that, we might find out something more. What we've been told at this point in time is that we should still expect some loss of, state aid. The budget going forward is minus the $992 million the federal government gave us the last 2 years for education. So there's no other way to put that back into the education fund. And again, your guess is as good as mine at this point, as far as exactly how that is going to impact from a standpoint of which programs from the state are going to be cut. And again, barring in a crystal ball, I think we still feel the general state aid reduction is a very likely scenario. Is that fair? After Maureen today again heard sort of about what's going on with state finances, and I don't think it's any more clear than that, really, at this point.
No, what they talked about today was, again, most likely cutting flat grant and alternate grant districts, and another $500 per student reduction in the foundation level. So for us, that's about $475,000 if they cut that. If not, I still think that they're going to cut to some level that would be equivalent to that 475, whether or not it's specifically general state aid or some of the other mandated categoricals. I feel right now that's a reasonable number. After noon tomorrow,
Right.
I feel a little differently.
So I'm sorry, can you say that again? How much additional will we lose?
475, which is about the difference between these first two pages, the first two worksheets, the baseline and the baseline less the general state aid. That's the difference between the reductions required.
Okay, so what is the number that we would have to be considering if we were only looking to 2013? What, in terms of,
My guess at that was sort of 600-ish.
okay. So-
600-ish this year, but you still gotta tackle the question next year, because
Exactly, right.
Maureen's going
Maureen,
to
do
give you an
concur?
answer here in a second. She's working on it. While she does that, let me just articulate. So option one, for instance, if we look at the baseline model for, option A, again, does increase class sizes slightly at the elementary level. We'd still have to cut $200,000 beyond that whole list of 660,000 items that are being addressed. And then option B, again, raises class sizes further. And then option C through E are a combination of going to grade level centers and then potentially making class size additions. Right, so going up to large class sizes. So, and again, we didn't give you an option B1 that gives going to class size of 32 and still retaining neighborhood schools, which I guess would be an option. But that doesn't potentially save much money anyway. And my impression from the board is that class sizes at that level are less than acceptable.
This list here, this 887,000.
Yes.
Is that in these two?
No.
No.
That list is, if you look at additional reductions required, you have to take, in option A, for instance, $200,000 off of list 2. Or, if you want to go to, at the extreme, grade level centers with larger class sizes, and we don't get any general state aid, you'd have to cut $200 and some thousand potentially off of that list at the other extreme. And again, they're not necessarily,
So option A, if you're looking at option A.
option A.
So we would have to
Assuming
take,
no change in state aid?
right.
Yes.
We'd have to take 200,000 from this list, that's 887,000,
Correct.
okay?
In addition to all of the cuts on list
On
one
list one. okay?
and the revenue enhancements that are articulated.
And if we go all the way out to G, we're,
That's if you did grade level centers with a class size of
Right.
32.
Yes.
right, then we wouldn't have to take anything off of those lists because we'd be up 200,000?
Correct. You could actually go back to the $660,000 list and add in $200,000 of
Okay.
the program.
So that's like the,
I would hesitate to say that, because there's the potential of losing the Title I funding.
Which
So
is-
actually,
Well, but even if you did that, you'd basically be flat.
right,
Right.
if you went all the way to.
Yes.
all the way to G,
To G.
under baseline,
Okay.
losing Title
Okay.
I. I want to clarify one thing though, Marie, on the third list, the 2010-11 budget cuts. You've got a summary at 652,000, and that is just to point out that those are all the cuts you would have to make to come up with the amount of cuts that we would need for option A if we lose general state aid.
Right.
Not necessarily in that order, that's.
Can you say that again?
That is summarized for you and cut off there to point out that those would be all of the options that you would have to take off of this third list in order to get you to option A on your baseline less general state aid model, where on the bottom it says
Okay,
additional reduction,
650?
650?
Okay, that's the 650?
Yeah. And
That's-
Linda, to go back to your question, to get us to 2013, if we lost general state aid, like we're predicting, we'll look at about a $2.3 million deficit on May 31st, which again is the number we're looking at. So divide that by 3 years, I'm thinking 800 grand.
And the reason I ask this is to add to what Dan said at the beginning. You know, he's talking about the 2015 date, and I understand why he's doing that. But what I want to point out is, when Dan talks about getting community input as part of a strategic planning initiative to talk about other sources of revenue moving forward to make up for all of this money that we're not going to have in the next several years, I would like us to consider what it would be like to focus on 2013, thinking that we have 2 years to engage the community in a conversation about what the priorities are for the district. I mean, we have a community that includes families with children in schools and people without children in schools, and I, for one, would not even be able to predict what people think is the priority for the district. If we let people know what deep, drastic cuts will do to the integrity of our educational program and allow them to weigh that against something like the R word, you know, that this is something that has to be discussed. Because in order to make up these kind of funds, there is no way to do it without affect student programming. And I think it's you know, crucial that people understand what that means. I mean, if it's okay with people to undo or go backwards, you know, regarding all the progress that's been made in the district, you know, it's a very, very difficult question, but this is what community members have to weigh in on. And so, you know, I want to keep it in mind that we could be talking about the $800,000 a year number as well. And I don't know if that's more palatable or not, but because either way, you know, we're talking cuts that are going to affect programs, that affect people, as Dan says. So as much as nobody wants their taxes raised, I'm not going to say whether or not people do or do not care about the quality of their schools. So this is something where we have to get the people engaged. And I'd rather think about that in the next 2 years than waiting to 2015, excuse me, for all of this to play out. So you know, that's something we also talked about in Finance Committee, Dan, and I just wanted to add that to what you had said initially.
Well, and I think the other thing too is that in 2013, the economic times might be different. And I think that if through all the communication that's going to take place in the next 2 years, and I think that if it gets to the point where we have to make some really deep and drastic cuts by the time 2013 comes, people in the community might be a little bit more receptive to the idea of doing a referendum rather than seeing the quality of education be so drastically changed at that time, if economic times are better.
There's only one way to find out, but I think that this 2-year time frame between now and then is really crucial for getting the community involved.
It's actually, well, it's actually three, 2013, it would be 3 school years. You'd have the 11 school year, the 12 school year, and the 13 school year. So, I mean, and in 2013, obviously, I think we talked in the Finance Committee meeting of building cuts and building a model that got us out to 2015. And I think ideally, you'd love to do that, but
I just would rather
you know,
have
I
the
think
community
the strategic
weigh in.
conversation is huge, right?
Yeah.
In terms of both revenue and expenses, and how ultimately we get to this notion of a self-funded school system, you know, because we're going to lose state support. So that by definition means we either have to comport our programs to existing revenues, or we have to comport our revenues to existing programs. So, that said,
guess-
I don't mind the notion personally of 2013 as a target, recognizing, saying out loud in front of a lot of people and whoever's watching on TV, that means that the painful conversations continue for an extended period, and it requires your engagement on an ongoing basis. It also requires that you get up the curve all the way on why we're doing what we're doing and what those numbers mean.
Right, because.
Not knowing what those numbers mean is you don't have that luxury anymore if you're here at this meeting. You need to know those numbers.
Again,
You know, and can I just add that, I don't know what is all in the public packet, but we have recommendations from the Teachers Association and the administrative staff, which hopefully include the staff in general, the input of the staff in general. And, you know, we are stretched thin already in terms of staff. You know, we have never had the luxury of a big staff with lots of support positions that bigger districts have. We've always done as best as we can with the staff that we've had, and they are spread thin and they work very hard. And to suggest the kind of cuts that make up the big money on these lists is going to negatively affect students. I mean, anybody who is intimately involved in the district as a whole knows this. There is no way we can spare these positions. So I have to say that out loud because, you know I have to be a steward of the district's finances, but, you know, ultimately, my priority is educating the kids of the district. And so I just want to repeat what Dan says. We are really going to have to know what everybody thinks is the priority in order to make, decisions on behalf of the community.
So I guess here's,
let me try to identify just a couple of things for clarification. One is I was asked today by someone, and so I want to clarify, sort of the definition of clubs, athletics, and extracurricular programs. Athletics, I think, are pretty self-explanatory, but clubs aren't always. Clubs don't include anything that's tied to a course. So band, choir, those aren't clubs. People may think of them as clubs, but those are really, curricular programs. And so if you, for instance, see one of the options of eliminating all the clubs, that's eliminating, the chess club, things like that, the Rotary Interact, geography club. That doesn't include band or choir, for instance.
just to throw a couple things, actually a question, and then throw a couple things out there. There are some cuts listed in the second page of 2010, 2011 cuts, or page 3 of these, that I'd be inclined to embrace now.
Okay.
Yeah, one is, as much as I love the police, I'm not necessarily inclined to have them at my meetings anymore. So, I'd be inclined to include that right away. I would be inclined to, with respect to revenue enhancement, the field trips borne by parents.
Can I make a suggestion, Dan?
Yeah.
Maybe we could go through these, Because I know that, like, I know I've been getting calls from people that say, well, I know that there's many times that as a parent I pay for the field trips. So that's, because I was thinking the same thing, and there's some things on there that we could certainly do. Maybe we could talk about this?
Yeah, and I have just one other clarification question. On list one, the second line, the curriculum director number, the number that was presented at the last meeting was substantially larger.
Because that was simply, her salary and benefits, but in reality, the actual savings to the district, if you eliminate a position, that person then takes a staff position, and effectively, the difference is the difference of, a non-tenured staff member's salary, plus the difference between her salary on the salary scale and her salary as an administrator.
Are you?
So if you cut that position, you don't really save $130,000 in salary and benefits.
Yeah, and I'm sensitive to not, I have some other questions, but I can take those offline on that one.
Right.
The other questions, you've got in the staff cuts down the second to last line, eliminate energy manager stipend. My recollection was that was tied to a contract, that if we had that.
It is. Now, here's the thing, is that contract that we paid them for for 5 years, I believe, or 4 years, once that contract's up, as long as you still have somebody who is doing that work, they will provide support in, software, et cetera, for perpetuity.
Okay.
Now, if you eliminate that stipend, then
You'd
you would be
stop
back
there.
to square one. And so if you ever decided to do it back again, you'd end up having to, front the cost of the program again.
What's the revenue that we save?
We've saved significantly over $1 million.
Yeah.
I mean, that balances
Yes.
out what that is.
Yep.
It was a performance contract, Diane, so if we didn't realize the savings that they guaranteed us, we didn't pay them. So we absolutely did. And $6,000 actually is cutting that stipend by a third. So we just haven't filled it yet this year, kind of waiting to see what was going to go on with this.
So
But if we
so
don't
it doesn't
fill
eliminate the role, it doesn't
No,
eliminate.
this
Oh, this would eliminate the
entirely
role.
eliminates the
You
role.
have to pay
Okay.
them as a,
For 0910.
Which means we would lose the support to
Correct.
the energy
Yes.
contract,
Yes,
which
we would.
means that if we
No
had
more
to.
training, no more
Okay.
seminars, none of that.
And, I mean, and that support, does it continue to produce additional savings on an ongoing basis?
Sure, the person who was in that role will
Okay,
continue to
so-
make recommendations to us for enhancements, yeah.
So, if we eliminate that, on a net basis, are we eliminating savings that offset that?
We very well might be, but
Probably.
it's hard for me to quantify.
Okay, in that case, then,
Awesome.
we probably shouldn't do that. With respect to, anyway, Marie, I'll defer to you at this point in terms of just going through, those were my couple quick questions, but I'll defer to you as to how do we want to go through these at this point? And I guess the question becomes, what do we want the work product to be at the back end so that we talk about something productive next Tuesday, and then so that we ultimately have a productive conversation on the 23rd. Linda, I'll make a suggestion, which is, for everyone, recognizing that we have to get a lot of this 661, if there are things that people just think, I can't do that, let's throw them out there now.
That's a good idea, I was going to say.
That we can't,
Yeah,
that we
like-
don't
like,
want?
I can't,
Yeah.
I can't in good conscience do this.
And this is just list one right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, like, I can't in good conscience do
Okay.
this.
Can I,
I can start, because I have no's all over my paper.
But did you add up the yeses to figure out what
Actually,
the
you
yeses
know what?
were?
On page one, there are more yeses than no's, so I can do this quickly.
Okay,
All right, eliminating seasonal grounds position at this point would be a safety issue, for sure, on the baseball fields, I know for one.
I agree.
So I can't support that. The last three under certified staff cuts, about the ACT prep course, the student council sponsor, and the class sponsors, I look at that kind of money and what kind of savings that is versus what the consequences of that would be, and I say no to those.
Agreed.
And on other staff cuts, unfortunately, I think the CAC meetings are crucial to the advancement of any, faction of curriculum improvement, and so I would say no. But of course, I guess that would be something that the WTA would have to weigh in on, because then that's asking teachers to stay after school to accomplish that.
Can I ask, could we have a shortened day on that, on those days? Like,
For school
Like a
improvement?
SIP day?
Oh, no, we don't do that. I mean,
no, but could we?
Oh,
They're all over the board.
probably not. From a standpoint, could you add more shortened days and do all the curriculum work on those shortened days? Probably, but, I mean, you'd probably add 5 more shortened days to the year.
Don't you pay by day too, as a district? In essence, we pay more for each day we're in school, or no?
No, well, we do, we
we have to
would.
be in session
But
for
we
so
have to be
many
in session
days,
so
so
many
we
days,
have
and
a
so you have to
longer school year.
balance out how many days you have to be able to have a school improvement. So you can only have one so long, because you have to make up the time effectively. That's why you can never have them back-to-back, for instance.
Can I just ask, as long as, we're doing this, can we get some, because this is, can we get like an explanation just for anyone who doesn't know what that is? Obviously, we know what the ACT prep course, but what is the student council sponsor at the high school and Fresh Soft class sponsors? Can we get a summary of what that is, as long as this is on here?
If you
Sure.
skip and let me look it up, yeah.
Okay, just so we know what we're talking about as opposed to just a listing.
And,
Really,
my
just-
last, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just to articulate with the ACT prep course, for instance, this year, we didn't have enough kids sign up to offer it anyway. So we said,
So we could eliminate it.
So we could
'cause there's all
eliminate
those
it,
other
because there are other
offerings.
options out there. And
There's the Zaps.
historically, we've done it, with 5 of our teachers, but in reality, this year, we didn't have enough kids sign up to offer it.
Oh,
And
so this is
So we
not
could
what's
take it
taking
away.
place in the classrooms
No.
prior? Oh, okay.
What is this?
I
This is the
misunderstood.
extra course that kids can sign up for in the
Kaplan.
spring, where, one of our teachers would come in and talk to them about each section of the test. effectively.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I-
So this is
That's
our,
okay.
our staff?
Yes,
This is our staff doing that? This is not the Kaplan?
no.
No, that's paid for. Each student has to pay for a Kaplan
Right,
class.
that's why I'm saying that we should probably talk about each one of these.
I know it's kind of painstaking, but can we just go down the list and either get just a brief, for example, secretary at Miller, I don't know how
Right
many
now,
secretaries there
there
are
are
there.
2 secretaries at Miller. This would eliminate one of those. All right, Manning has 2 secretaries as well, but also has about twice the staff. Now, the disadvantage is if you only have 1 secretary at Miller, every time that secretary is sick or goes to lunch, the principal has to cover the office, which means the principal can't be doing the myriad of other things that she would be doing. And so she becomes very tied to the office and can't. It's the same situation we had at South. We only had 1 secretary, and so the principal ends up being the backup secretary. Reduce the junior high secretary right now.
Can I go back to that? So
Sure.
the cuts that we have in front of us are from the administration, so the administration is saying that we should?
This is what, in order to come up with the $1.2 million of cuts we were asked to come up with, right? These are we took all of the suggestions that anybody had given us, right? And again, that's that other list that's still in your orange folder. It's actually in the public packet as well. And then we went through these, added anything else we wanted to, and tried to come up with what we thought, again, would meet that bottom goal of either 1.2 or 1.6 million dollars in cuts. These aren't things we'd necessarily, all of these things have a negative impact. The issue is trying to have the least negative impact on kids and safety. So, and again, these aren't necessarily prioritized, they're just categorized.
So can we go back to the beginning then, in terms of going through these, like we, suggested,
Well, we
So-
already started, because, I mean, with respect to eliminating I mean,
We've already talked about eliminating the curriculum director.
okay.
The-
So-
Again, that's, that has, I think, prior to having a curriculum director and coming out of the strategic plan was, one of their very clear goals is that they wanted someone to manage our curriculum so that we had a K-12 curriculum that was well articulated and that was followed.
Right.
And if you look at, by any standard, the work that position has done, Christy has done a fabulous job of making sure that, all four of the core curriculum areas over the last 4 years, you just followed up and finished the last piece of the social studies piece by approving new textbooks. She's worked with groups of teachers and administrators and sometimes outside consultants to build a much stronger curriculum. If you take a look at the changes we've made in math, we've made wholesale changes in math from kindergarten through 10th, 12th grade, all right? Teachers are doing, the instruction is different, the resources are different, the assessments that are in place are stronger. When you eliminate that position, you don't have anyone whose job really is to oversee that. It's easy to say the principals can do that, but the principal is dealing with, the student who has a discipline issue, or, the parents who are having a custody battle and get the kid in the middle of it and are dealing with those kind of issues. Plus all the evaluation of teachers and just running the day-to-day issues of the building. So it's easy to say, have the principals take up that role, and that's the position we were in when I got here. And, each elementary school had their own reading series. The district approved one, but 2 of the 3 schools didn't implement it.
But if, I guess what I'm saying is if, because of the amount of cuts that we have to make, if that was a decision, then that.
Then there's a net savings of
A net savings of
$66,000. yeah.
$66,000, okay.
Right.
And then the principals would take up that role?
Yes, if you-
And that's because the curriculum director would go into a different position?
But again, you're not going to get the, you're not going
Right.
to get the same kind of direction
Right.
that you have. Supports,
Okay.
again, back to Miller, there are 2 secretaries,
Right.
you eliminate 1.
Right.
Yeah, and on that, given what you just described in terms of what that means if one is sick, and still at a 200 kid school, it's one of those things where the numbers at 200 to 400 are interesting numbers because they're not mass, and
Yeah,
so.
without
you have
redundancy,
inefficiencies.
you always have problems.
But can we, on the next one, we talk about reducing it to part-time. At Miller, I think the most I could support there would be reducing it to part-time.
We can do that. I mean, again, it
'Cause
all
that would be
depends
the
upon
same
what the board is trying to come up with,
Right.
is money
Yeah,
Right,
reduced.
I understand.
right.
If you want to cut $800,000 instead of 1.6 million,
Well, I think
Know what I
what we do is we come up
can
with the
go
we
through-
come up with numbers,
sure,
right?
yeah.
We'll stick those back in a PMA model, and we'll take a look at that PMA model again next week,
We can do that,
right?
sure,
I mean, I think that feels like, to me,
we can do that.
what you want to
Right.
do.
So again, the secretary at junior high, they have 2 secretaries in the office, eliminating 1 to part-time. So you'd have 1 full-time person there and another person there in the middle of the day. Eliminating a
You
tech
said
support.
you have 2.
What's that?
You have 2 secretaries
Currently,
in
there are 2
Manning?
full-time secretaries at the junior high, yes.
I'm
There used to be
sorry,
2.5.
What do you have in Manning?
Manning has 2,
For how many students?
420 more or less.
And Miller has half that many students?
Yes. Well, Miller has about 200.
Well, but then, plus Sassett and stuff, but anyway, yeah.
Okay, but so you're recommending doing 1 and...
1.5.
1.5? Okay, what's the reasoning for that?
Simply put, I mean, at 200, you have too many for 1, I think, and you're probably not enough for 2. If you mentioned Manning was 2.5, and we're clearly not talking about reducing
The
Manning. from
junior
2.
high used to be 2.5.
Okay.
I think he said Manning has 2.
Manning
for
has 2,
400.
correct.
So
So
it makes sense to me,
eliminating
though.
this junior high, or reducing the junior high to
Right, but the...
half, would leave them, what, 1.5?
That would leave them with
1.5.
1.5,
Okay,
yes.
and they have approximately the same number of students, well,
They have
within
less
100.
than Manning.
Within 100, but it's a...
But junior high kids are different than elementary kids.
Kathy's
Understood.
asking
What
about,
I'm saying
Miller?
is it doesn't make sense to me.
To cut just at Miller and not at Manning?
No, just to cut it.
No,
Miller versus the junior high?
Not to cut Miller differently.
no,
No,
if Manning
the
has
numbers.
400 and Miller has 200, if Manning has 400 with 2 secretaries, then I'm not understanding why we need 1.5 at Miller. Why
Well,
does
It's a
it-
Yeah, but the
coverage issue,
scale
it's a
economies-
coverage of duties.
Yeah, the scale economies don't work, because that would be like saying, well, Manning has 1 principal, should Miller have half of 1? The scale economies don't work at those small numbers.
Well, and how many kids are at the junior high? There's,
I'm sorry, I'm
300
not
and
following the
some offhand.
logic.
okay.
If you have 400
Plenty if you count
students
the
at Manning
Sassett
and you're
kids or
saying
not.
you have 2 secretaries, and you have half that many students at Miller, and that,
Right.
then it makes sense to me that you would only need 1 position at
Well,
Miller.
the issue there is simply having somebody to cover, like when somebody's gone to lunch, et cetera. So that you have coverage and the principal doesn't have to step in and provide that coverage.
Or
I'm
if
sure the
somebody
duties
calls in
involve
sick.
more than that, though, in the scheme of things.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Right.
Because if
Okay,
you're
but
going
if
to.
that person's part-time, they may not necessarily be there
But what you
anyway.
do is have somebody work the middle of the day to cover the lunchtime. Or have them cover early in the day to cover sort of student arrival, one of the two.
And have them come in when the person's sick?
You could potentially. I mean, you could always get a sub for somebody when they're sick. I mean, you can always do that. It's harder because you have to find somebody who already knows our attendance system and all that sort of stuff, but, I mean, it can be done.
I mean, I'm not trying to, we're talking about people's jobs and stuff here. I'm just trying to look at things logically here.
No, no, and this, like I say, the scale economies are funny at 200 and 400. They don't always, it's not always where you staff. I mean, we could argue about administrative staffing on scale economies at a lot of levels, because, there are clearly central staffs of other districts that may have 1,000 more kids that are staffed similarly to ours. But it doesn't change the fact that we have 5 schools and all this other stuff going on. So the scale economies don't always work where you just take the number of kids and divide by X. You have functions that need to be covered and people that need to be present. And I think in the case of Miller, I think the notion of asking either a sub to step into our attendance system or the principal to step into the role of a secretary when somebody's gone for some reason, that just feels untenable.
Well, plus, if you think about
It
both
may end up
Manning and
having to
Miller.
happen eventually anyway.
Yeah, Manning and Miller have 1 principal, where the junior high and the high school have a principal and assistant principal and other people. So if we're talking about taking the junior high, 1 junior high secretary to part-time, it would probably make sense to do the same thing at Miller, because at Miller, you only have 1 administrator to step in, where at the junior high right now, there's 2 secretaries and 2 administrators. So if you look at that in terms of who else could do it other than a
How
sub.
many students are at the junior high?
Manning's a little different too because the administrative staff is all there too.
How many students are at the junior high?
Junior high is
340.
300?
340, like
330 or
339 or
340?
something like that.
See, I saw Ron out
Never
there.
remember if that includes or doesn't include the Sassett kids. So,
Okay.
330, 340,
330 regular ed, then we have the 55 or 58.
Sassett? Okay.
And how many secretaries are at the high school? I don't, do we know?
4, 4.5 if you count the library aide. 4.
4 secretaries at the high school?
Yep.
For 560 kids. So I mean, again, that would be, that's a ratio of sort of a little over 1 to 1.
Well, and one of the differences there is one's a registrar, and those things
Yeah.
are not done at the
No,
elementary level.
I'm not,
You know what I mean?
I'm just saying that,
So-
that you don't just do scale economies and divide by number of kids kind of thing.
And again, one of the disadvantages of the high school is you don't have a central office,
Yeah.
so. Ready to move on? Eliminated tech support position. Right now, we have basically 3 people who provide tech support within the district, and this would eliminate one of those positions.
Do we have 3 plus the administrator?
Yes.
So we have 4.
She doesn't
IT.
do, first, she's part-time.
Okay, but I
Second,
mean,
she doesn't do computer repair.
but IT, if we're talking the IT
Yes.
department, okay.
eliminating serving french fries at the high school. Said effectively, that's the only thing that's, fried. And so if you can eliminate that, you effectively eliminate one food service worker.
Okay, I did ask Maureen, I mean, the kids buy the fries, so
Yeah, I
there's.
don't have any way to cost that out though, Joel.
There's no way we cover our costs on
The
that.
assumption
good
here
for 'em
is
anyway.
basically that if they don't have the fries, they're gonna order something else. I mean, their appetite doesn't decrease if we discontinue fries. So I guess maybe it's a little simplistic assumption, but I would assume they're gonna buy something else. We did that whole wellness committee a couple of years ago. We didn't specify getting rid of all fried foods, but it is the only thing we serve fried entire district-wide. So,
I just question the savings, if that's, I mean, you don't know how many fries you sell, and how much it costs to.
There's one person who.
But this is one person's salary then?
that
Yes.
there's a
it's
lot
not,
of
it's
fries.
not a full salary, no. It would be a reduction in one person's hours.
So this is a reduction in somebody.
Yes.
But you're losing the money that the kids are buying the fries. and
I'd rather
you're making it
save
up with saying they're gonna buy an
program.
apple, and that probably isn't gonna happen.
No, but I'd rather save, something like a program or something that's more academic than fries.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna go down this list, I think we need to look every time and ask, is this affecting a student educational program or extracurricular?
Right.
Right.
And otherwise, it's gonna be extremely difficult.
Right.
Okay.
Again, eliminating part-time custodian at the junior high. So we take one of our full-time people and make them a part-time person.
How many custodians cover the junior high right now?
There's one person who works days, there's one person who comes in middle of the day, and then there are 2 evening custodians, if I remember
So
correctly.
4 FTE, and you'd go down to
3.5, yes.
Okay.
Seasonal grounds?
Seasonal grounds position, again, that position's vacant. To be honest, it's difficult to fill, just because it's a position without benefits.
So when you say it's vacant, but we'd save 20,000, is that save 20,000 by not filling it?
Correct. I mean, if we just eliminated the position, that's $20,000 in savings.
Would it,
Again,
But we had issues not very long ago about this.
yes, we did, and that's why we added this position 2 years ago to help try to keep our fields in good shape.
His parents had safety issues about the fields.
There were some issues, particularly with the baseball and softball diamonds.
what about hiring a service? Would that be cost prohibitive?
Not necessarily. One of the issues would become, would the custodial union look at that as outsourcing their jobs, which,
But if we're
could be
having
potentially be a problem.
difficulty filling the position, I wonder if they would be amenable to that.
See?
Given that we're still committed to particularly athletic extracurriculars, yeah, I got to agree with Linda. I'm not inclined to eliminate this position.
We've already discussed energy.
Kathy, okay.
Well,
we look
I would
into
like
that
to look
question and
into,
Yeah,
I would like to look
yeah,
into
look at-
hiring
we
a
will.
service
Yeah.
to take care of
We
that,
will.
if that's a possibility.
Okay. We talked about the energy.
Talked about that, reduce custodial overtime effectively. This would do, instead of, right now, our head custodians come in every day that we don't have school and check the buildings. And effectively, what this would do is have them only come in one day on the weekend. So effectively, they wouldn't come in on Saturdays, they'd only come in on Sundays. So again, we have aged buildings, and we have things happen. We had a pipe burst 2 days ago at Manning in the cafeteria that's now gonna have to be, repaired probably over spring break. But
But if there was an emergency, someone would be called in to go in and get paid overtime or something, correct?
well, right now, they come in, and work about an hour and a half a day, or on each day, to check the building and make sure everything's working, so that if there is a problem with the boiler or pipes break, that it gets fixed before school is in session. So, again,
This would eliminate for 2 days on the weekend to 1.
correct. This would cut the overtime for building checks basically in half. Right? eliminate the junior high foreign language. A few years ago, we added, Spanish and French, and this would effectively eliminate those courses. So kids would have to wait until they were ninth graders to take foreign language.
How many kids are currently in the junior high Spanish and French?
This year, in fact, we didn't have enough students to have French for seventh graders, so there's about 10 or 11 French students as eighth graders, and there are probably about 60 to 70 kids in Spanish.
So 60 to 70 junior high kids taking
Yes.
Spanish?
I think the feeling was that by offering that, we pulled some kids out of some of the music programs and choral programs that we were offering at the junior high as well, though.
You clearly do, because they
yeah.
can't choose band, choir, and Spanish.
Yeah.
What does that do to the high school if we eliminate the junior high Spanish program?
They just can't take Spanish 5 effectively, or they can't take the AP Spanish effectively, because they wouldn't have 5 years to get there.
They'd be starting.
They started Spanish 1 then as freshmen.
How about if we just, since the numbers are showing that there's interest in Spanish but not French, how about if we just offered the Spanish?
Right.
Well, for instance, that's effectively what we did. It's a demand-driven curriculum. Just for instance, up above where you see the course selection enrollment savings, that $150,000 is because students chose different courses and we could eliminate other sections. And so,
Does that reduce
the-
a position from full-time to part-time at all?
potentially, yes. Well, you would probably eliminate a part-time person. Again, all of the staffing issues, based on, there's some basic rules with any certified staffing. First, you have to find, and every tenured position you have to find all those people jobs based on what they're certified to do. And then only after that, then you eliminate non-tenured people. So for instance, you might have somebody who's teaching Spanish at the junior high, and if they eliminate the Spanish position, if she's certified to teach math, for instance, she would bump a non-certified math teacher. So.
Well, I'm more concerned about not offering Spanish to the students at the
Yeah.
junior high.
What about the way it used to be, when they could go across the street in their 8th grade year? They took Spanish at the high school.
They could potentially do that.
They took
I mean, the
French
problem is
at the high
that
school.
causes some, first, it raises the number of sections at the high school most likely. And second, it's going to, which is actually more expensive because junior high teachers teach 6 classes and high school teachers only teach 5. So if you just take those classes and put them over at the high school, it's more expensive. And the other issue is that there's some scheduling issues with doing that. I mean, it worked they only did it for 2 years, I believe. And that's one reason we moved it to the junior high, is because there was scheduling issues and it was fairly limited the amount of kids who could take part in it. I think they limited it to 20 kids or 25 kids. So, and this was to expand it to a larger group of kids.
What happens if you only offered it to the 8th grade at the junior high?
Well, you're going to have some savings, of that. Maybe you'd save 2/3 of that. But if you only offer 1 year at the junior high, effectively, common practice is 2 years of junior high language instruction are equivalent to 1 year of high school instruction. And so if you only
But the
offer.
curriculum is cut in half. It's not a full curriculum in the 2 years.
Right, they get half of it they get half of it as 7th graders and half as 8th graders. So if you only give them the half as 7th graders, there's no benefit.
But prior years, we offered a full year if they went across the street to the high school.
Right, and they went into the
So
high school.
In my thinking, you could still do, I'm not saying that that's what I want to do, but in the way my progressive thought is that if you did a full year in 8th grade at the junior high, there should be some savings.
Well, you save on losing the seventh graders. The issue is that one of the issues at the junior high is the junior high courses are only 43 minutes long, not the 50 of the high school. So over the course of the year, that's a lot of instruction that the junior high kids lose.
But we did that with algebra as well. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
not like we haven't done this before.
True. So,
I have to ask, how many of our students are actually going into a 5th year of language? I mean, is it really benefiting? Are we seeing benefits
this year, I
for
think
them?
there's, hold on, I'll look. I have those numbers.
Is it worth it?
It's not huge numbers. Because most kids, 4 years of language is enough to go to any college, and so it's only if they're really considering fifth grade.
if
So
they
this year, for instance, we have 4 kids who would be in French 5. And we have, this would be 4 next year. And we have 11 kids who'd be in Spanish 5.
If
Are
they
there
take,
additional state-
if they take the 4 years of the language just at the high school, can they still take the AP test?
They can, and some kids do, but usually you have 1 or 2 kids do that. You don't have, it's not, in many schools do that. They take the 4 years and they choose, if they want to, they try to take the AP test. But the AP coursework is really meant for a 5th year of the language.
This falls into that classic conundrum of we know we need money.
Right.
And this gets to sort of core competencies and choices that we, it means that there'll be more kids in the junior high level involved in choral and music programs and other electives, as opposed to the language elective. And given our size and given the numbers he just mentioned for 5th year participation, I don't get the sense that it's terribly deleterious, is the word
Does
that
this,
comes to mind.
does this 48,000 number include dropping Spanish 5?
No. Because there wouldn't be any savings on that for, several years. And actually, at this point, Spanish 4 and 5 are combined into one class. And so those students who are in Spanish 5 are being, taught in a course that's also got Spanish 4 kids in it.
Okay, the next things,
Hire separate social workers. We have a social work retirement at the end of the year, and instead of hiring 1 full-time person, there are a lot of scheduling issues already with the person trying to be in both buildings. And so this way, the junior high and high school would each have their own social worker part-time, and there's a savings simply because 2 part-time people don't get benefits. So, but to be honest, scheduling-wise, it's a positive for both buildings, because then they can schedule their programming without having to base it on when the person is available from the other building.
Is this replacing?
That would still replace the social worker, but we'd have 2 part-time people instead of 1 full-time person. So, department coordinator stipends at both the junior high and the high school. Right now, those coordinators manage department meetings. They do not evaluate, they're not department chairs. So much of their work is clerical in nature as far as organizing the, department meetings, taking minutes, those kind of things, which, teachers could share and the administrators can make sure that those things get done.
so these are like, the math department, the
Yes.
English department.
Right.
So right now, teachers are getting stipends to be the coordinator,
Correct.
and that's what this does. Is this in their contract?
Yes, but those are stipends, so the board is not required to fill those stipends, but if they do fill the stipends, they have to pay the contractually agreed upon amounts. And those appointments are all annual, so the board does not have to, fill them for next year if they would not want to. PBIS stipends, each building over the past, 5, 6 years, they've put in place stipends for the people on the PBIS teams to get that program up and running. At this point, the program is fairly mature, and, the administrators feel that, if we're gonna cut things, that's something that they can cut, and the administrators will have to manage those programs.
So there's one, this $25,000 is one at each building?
There's 1 team at each building. Each team has 4 to 6 members usually. Eliminate the assistant yearbook advisor at the high school. That's pretty straightforward. That's a stipend. We've already spoken to the AC prep courses. This year, we didn't have enough students sign up to take that course to run the course anyway. The student council sponsor as we looked at, we eliminated many clubs last year at the high school, and we continue to always look at the clubs as far as the scope of how many students are involved. Student council is pretty straightforward. In many schools, the principal effectively is the student council sponsor because he meets with them. And they eliminate the freshman, sophomore class sponsors. They don't have large projects in the same way that the junior class does and the senior class does with prom and homecoming. And so those are things that you feel could eliminate with relatively minor impact.
And I just want to point out that when you eliminate these kinds of things, it gives more responsibilities to the administrators. And I want, people to be mindful of that when you're talking about eliminating something like a curriculum director or, technology director, because there's only so much that the principals can do.
And for that reason, Linda, going back to your comment, I mean, I would prefer not to see the student council sponsor eliminated. The Frost soft class, though, I mean, I could see that as more tenable.
Eliminate the CAC meetings during the day. Again, effectively, that's the cost of subs. So if we're going to have the teachers do the work outside the school day, there's, the key really is there to eliminate, to affect a savings, all curriculum work is going to have to be done on SIP days, department meetings, or in-service days. Because if you're going to have people do it after school and have, regular meetings, at some point, there's going to be some desire for, compensation for that work. All right. One of the things we've done is we do a lot less of summer curriculum projects, which when I got here, the district did a lot of, and most of those were very focused on, individual classroom kind of needs and not systemic. Whereas now, all of the curriculum work, again, through Christie's work, is, it's holistic and systemic. And so we don't have people we're paying to do a curriculum project that they're only going to use in their own classroom. All the work now, everybody at the grade level of the team or the school benefits from. So though there's a savings, you're going to either spend that much money or more in summer curriculum work, most likely. But again, if you don't have a curriculum director, you're going to, somebody has to manage those meetings. And so if you don't have any to manage those, you might as well eliminate them.
The meetings, how much time do they spend on these meetings and how often during the year?
It depends. Usually they meet, each of the CACs, when they're really being involved. For instance, the social studies CAC might meet 6 times this year, usually for a half day.
For all the reasons you just mentioned, I'd prefer not to eliminate those subs.
Eliminate summer school programming. Again, our summer school doesn't make money. It costs us money to run the program. $9,000 would basically eliminate our summer program. Our program, for the most part, is remedial. We've had people come up and speak on the fact they would like to see more enrichment programs. We've tried offering a number of them. We just don't have a lot of students who are interested in taking part in those. So this would eliminate those programs.
Is there a way to reduce it as opposed to completely eliminating it? I mean, it certainly serves a certain population of our students.
Right now, if you look, for instance, at the numbers are very small at any individual grade level. So if you were going to eliminate it, or if you were going to reduce it, you would effectively have to combine grades and have like kindergartners and first graders together and second and third together, for instance. And you can do that, but it's going to be much less effective because the target of the instruction historically has been to prepare kids for the grade they're going to enter. And so if you're going to now have to do that with 2 groups of kids in the same room, it's less effective. And so it's probably not something that, from an effectiveness standpoint, has an advantage if you reduce it. That's pretty much what the cost is to run the program, and to reduce it any further, then the educational benefit becomes negligible.
Is there any other programs available for those that are interested in the remedial aspect?
Well, they could take programs through COD. They could actually, as a tuition student, take a program in another district. We do have students from other districts occasionally come into our district to take those programs. So
But I would imagine other districts are probably going to be cutting their things too, so.
It's possible. I mean, COD will still offer their options. You know, those are obviously more expensive, but those are there. And there are a number of, most universities and colleges offer some type of, summer enrichment or remediation options for kids. So,
Well, I would like to see that maintained.
Well, actually,
we
if our
can.
attendance is not really high, I'm thinking it's something we should consider. Can you tell us what the attendance is?
not off the top of my
First,
head.
Can you let us
It's
know?
not very
if it-
high. Sure, we can do that.
I do think unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of out-of-work teachers who are going to be wanting to do tutoring. And I think there will be options out there for kids who need remedial work over the summer with private tutoring.
Well, how much does the summer school curriculum kind of blend with what they've just finished up that year and then carry them into the next year? It seems like that would be a benefit to have it.
The goal of the summer school program, I thought I just said this, was to prepare kids for the grade they're going into. And so, jump start into first grade, for instance, prepares kindergartners who have identified deficiencies to help them get ready for first grade. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. They're in between grades. So I just think that if it had a purpose at one point, it still has that same purpose.
Clearly, it has a purpose.
But
Nobody's
when
going to
I-
argue
Yeah,
that.
think
The
they'll
question, the question is its efficacy, you're right, and I think, given that we, given that our scope is limited, and our size is limited, and our budget is particularly limited, offering it at some portion of what's there, that doesn't seem to make sense to me either. So to me, it's a binary decision.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think it is.
We either keep it or we don't.
Can we go back to what Kathy said? Could we, at the next
We'll
meeting, get
you-
those numbers?
We'll have the enrollment numbers for you at the next meeting. Again, non-salary related cuts, adjusting the substitute pay scale, saves us some money, and I think somebody just articulated, the state is looking at probably releasing 17,000 teachers across the state in the next month and a half. So finding substitute teachers next year is probably not going to be as difficult as it has been occasionally. So leaving our pay scale will probably be fine.
So this is as opposed to going up? Is that what this means? Like, it's this $15,000 savings, was it
Right now,
going to go up?
when teachers work more than 10 days,
10 days, it goes up to 97, and I believe it's 30 days,
and
it
then
goes up to
30
81.
days, we start paying them on the teacher scale. We'd stop doing that. So even if they were a long-term sub, they'd still be paid at the $97 a day rate. Okay, and again, with the number of,
We have to do that.
long-term leaves that we've experienced in the last few years, there's a fairly substantial savings there. Again, reduced professional development options.
This is travel options.
Well, basically, that means we're not going to pay for them to go to the conference. I mean, it's all covered under professional travel, but we're not going to pay the registration for them to go or pay the mileage for them to go, et cetera. That's
Okay,
all
so
within the
this
scope of
number,
that.
this number is not just the
Travel,
mileage
no.
reimbursement?
No, that's the cost of
Is-
professional conferences.
Okay, because this.
I understand it says travel, but
Yeah.
that's just,
So they're all
In that case, then,
across.
I'm going to ask that we identify the registration fees separately, so that we know what that is.
we'd have to, yeah, I don't know
As
how I would
opposed
do
to-
that
as
for you.
opposed to-
Leave it,
as-
but I'll
as
gi-
opposed-
I'll give it a go. How's
Give
that?
college trip.
I'm not too sure that I can do it, but I'll
I
give it a
mean,
go.
the issue is if you're going to you sort of set an arbitrary savings, if you're going to make this much savings in that program.
Well, I guess this begs a question, a couple of these, and it begs a question on administrative costs like cell phones, which is not on here, but.
It's actually on one of the other
is-
lists.
Is one of the other lists. We pay full boat for this, but what if we reimbursed for half? Or we reimbursed for a
All
cap?
three of the employment contracts with
Yeah,
the three
our
unions,
requirements
state,
require it.
state,
Okay.
I believe that it's
I'm
the
just
IRS
asking.
reimbursement
Yeah.
rate, which is 50 cents a mile right now.
Okay,
So if we pay for them to go to the conference, we effectively have to pay for transportation. It's in the contract.
gotcha.
But this isn't just travel. This 20,000 encompasses the registration
The
fee.
registration fees, meals, any cost of professional development outside the district.
And
Yes.
this is teachers,
Okay,
administrators.
but we can choose
Yes.
to just pay for the registration and not for the other things, correct?
No, well, no,
No,
it's
not
in our contract that
contractual.
if we're sending them, effectively, if we're paying for the, the conference registration, we're sending them, we have a contractual obligation to reimburse them for mileage.
What's the total professional development budget?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
I think it used to be 60,000, I think we cut it a third last year.
So it's
No, we still,
40-ish
this
now?
isn't like the in-house professional development that we
Correct.
still do. This is,
It's
you
just sending
know,
people out to conferences and
yeah,
workshops.
okay.
How does,
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
People
There's
apply-
there's all kinds of other questions.
People
about
ask
How
to
does
go, they
this, how does
submit
this,
it.
how does the CEC thing work in that context now? And I don't know.
That's a different
Let's-
question.
Let's, since we have a lot of questions about this one, let's move on. We understand, everybody understands what it is,
Yeah.
right? So would be okay to move on?
Yes.
Eliminate support for Destination Imagination, that's a program that historically the district has given some level of support to, even though it's not really a district-sponsored activity.
That's gotten really high.
So, again, no longer substitute the high school yearbook. Effectively, we'd still pay a stipend for the yearbook advisor, but otherwise than that, whatever the cost of the yearbook is what kids pay to get the yearbook.
Is that stipend, is that the one up here?
No,
Eliminate?
that's the assistant. So there's still
So-
a
Lowers
yearbook
the
advisor
cost
stipend
to
as well.
Students for the
Right.
yearbook.
So right now, we pay a stipend to a yearbook advisor and an assistant?
Yes.
That's what we do right now, okay. But this, okay.
We're saying we're gonna cut that.
And effectively, we also subsidize the cost of the yearbook. So
Yeah,
kids
we're-
pay
Right,
$30, for instance, for the yearbook, or,
right.
Kids with,
Pay
kids with it,
$43 for
Through
the
this
yearbook right now. It really costs about 60.
so they'd have to pay full boat for
They
that.
pay
Correct.
full, the 60, okay.
Unfortunately,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
no longer print W-2s out. Simply, we just, send them electronically to the staff or let them pull them up through Skyward. Save about $5,000 by doing a complete inventory of, supplies before we order them. Of course, $5,000 isn't a real savings because there's some secretarial time that has to now do that inventory. All right?
Wonder what the wash is on that. Just
I don't know.
curious, but.
Potentially save some money by, shaking our insurance broker down for services effectively and going out for RFP.
Is that a realistic number?
Yeah.
Potentially.
Okay.
Eliminate the geese police,
Yep.
all right? Try and fake animals. Now, here's the issue with that geese police. Before we had that, we had schools that would not come and participate in our athletic program because they felt our fields were a safety hazard.
I know, oh my.
So if the fake animals don't work, geese police is gonna have to come back from a standpoint that, we can't conduct an athletic program if people won't come and play away games at our facilities because of the geese and
What do the
what
geese
geese
police
leave
do right
behind.
now? What do they do right now?
Scare the geese away.
During a game?
If we can negotiate a new
No.
contract with them.
I mean,
Let's see if
during
we
a
can
game?
negotiate.
No.
Actually, the cost of the geese police, believe it or not, has been the exact same in the
Yeah.
6 years I've been here.
Our
They've
geese
never
police
increased the
costs are not
cost.
excessive in comparison.
Oh.
And I don't know if you've seen, I have a dog, I walk around our schools, especially the high schools sometimes, and I walk around areas that, other public areas where there aren't geese police, and there's a big difference between how noticeable the geese are.
Let's take a chance on the
Yeah.
geese police next year and,
Okay.
and hope
There you
that,
go.
Try the fake
hope that
animal.
they've been effective at chasing them to somebody else's field.
Okay. Eliminate the Thanksgiving feast at the high school.
This is the one for
Effectively,
this is one for the kids?
The high school students, yeah, where we feed all the kids for Thanksgiving. So,
They really look forward to that, though. I
yes, they do.
for that amount of money, I'm not sure that it's
Sponsor
worth
that for us.
We
eliminating.
can try. We can try to find a sponsor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
Sponsor for that?
give Butterball turkey.
Eliminate food service staff, breakfast and lunch. Basically, the food service staff get to eat for free right now. But actually, that isn't contractual, so
It is or isn't?
it is not contractual. If it was contractual, it wouldn't be on the list. it's-
So they, I guess they're eating $3,000 worth of food, is that what that is?
That's the number the food service people gave us. So,
Okay.
we're cutting, about $90,000 in technology purchases, mostly computer replacements, some laptops, things that otherwise would happen. And again, one of the things up above, if you cut one of our tech support people, there's, it's not really the time to expand the amount of technology available because you got to be able to support it. Not waive athletic band drama fees for fee waiver students. If the students are involved in the program isn't required as part of the curriculum, then we do not have an obligation to waive fees. So even if somebody was on free or reduced lunch and they wanted to play football, for instance, the district is not required to waive that fee. Historically, we don't have to.
Okay.
I'd like to
And-
see if we can still try to do something for those kids. I don't know if it has to be that much money, but that is not a huge sum of money. And
That
if
isn't.
there's just some reduced kind of thing, maybe pay, a payment plan, some other options besides getting rid of that altogether.
Again, payment plans tend to
Come up with nothing, I know.
be more trouble than they're worth. There's a lot of
Or maybe a
administrative costs.
reduced, how about a reduced
Reduced
fee?
fee instead
Potentially
of a
have a
total
reduced fee.
waiver. I mean,
Sure.
it's $1,500.
And the reason it's low is because we anticipate that, we wouldn't actually get much money because most kids just wouldn't participate.
Right,
And in reality, we still have to run the program, so there's no savings necessarily.
right.
And then again, these are changes, the last two are changes we've effectively already made.
So these are
But they're
done?
not in the baseline model.
So in terms of the model, let's, to recapitulate, from this page, when we talk next week about cuts that we're gonna put in the model and then look at the effect on projections, the things I heard, and you've got notes as well. We're looking at, instead of eliminate one secretary, we've got part-time, Ed Miller. We've got no on the seasonal grounds and no on the energy manager stipend. I've got a no on the student council sponsor. I've got a no on the CAC subs. For the time being, Joel, given that I think that the summer school program is a binary decision, why don't we leave that in as a cut and then get the information about how many students and all that kind of stuff, and then make a decision about that next week. And then we have Linda, I'm going to suggest on the fee waiver for band students that we look at half of that number.
Sure.
And then the only other question I had noted was on the professional development piece. What's the registration fees and understanding that better?
It
I
depends.
guess the thing is leave it as a cut in the model, but let's talk about that some more like we are on the summer school piece.
Okay, and Dan, did you mention on the seasonal grounds position that we were looking into hiring a service?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot that, but yes, that's a follow-up
Well,
question
you're not
as
going to make
well.
the cut, so the issue is can you make some savings
Yeah.
potentially through outsourcing it?
Dan, just to be clear, what you're talking about now is we haven't made these decisions, we're just talking
No,
about
we're
this for the
talking
model.
about putting it in the model.
Yes, perfect,
To
okay.
understand, yeah, let
Thank
me
you.
say that out loud.
Thank you.
Decision's not made.
Decisions not made, thank you.
Mr. Heights, decision not made. We're just looking at the models.
Thank you. Okay.
You know your decision made.
Huh?
Okay. All right. Going to the potential revenue enhancements. Allowing advertising on the fencing at the baseball, softball fields as much as it's allowed. One suggestion was put more cell towers up or more antennas on the cell towers that exist. We can't do that. You could take the two light standards that are only light standards and are not cell towers and put cell towers on them. Right, so you could replace those and potentially bring in somewhere between $30,000 and $60,000 in revenue.
Can I ask the question, you said to the extent you can for the softball, baseball fields, is that?
There's some questions about what level of advertising we could do and still, meet all of our IHSA rules and some other
Okay, say
potential issues.
the cell tower thing again. Yeah,
There are 4 light poles at the
Yes.
football field.
Okay.
2 of them have cell towers on them,
Yes,
right? 2 of them don't.
okay,
We can't add cell towers by contract to the ones that already are there.
that exists.
Add additional
Correct.
antennas.
We can't put more antennas up on there.
But if we put up a
could
new light pole.
do 2 more cell towers on the other
Two
light poles and potentially
light
get
poles are there, Dan.
$30,000 to $60,000
Okay.
in, because we'd replace the light standards,
Is that something?
which are more robust cell tower.
Okay, is that something we know from our current contract vendor kind of thing?
Current contracts with the two cell.
People call us all the time and say they want to put more on there.
Huh?
Don't allow
People
it.
call us all the time and want to put
Okay.
cell towers
I've got
up.
a note in my
Yeah.
folder right now to call somebody, but I'm not opening that bag of worms unless you all tell me to do so.
Unless you tell us to.
Because it was a bag of worms last time.
I think that's a
In what
big
sense?
conversation, though. That's a big
Yeah.
conversation with that
That's-
community that affects.
Yeah.
Well, I thought the lights were,
No, it was also
No,
the cell
Was
tower.
It was both.
It
okay.
was the cell tower.
Okay, let's not
Because of the,
go
yeah,
there.
okay, that's
Again, there would be $60,000 potentially.
Well,
not probably worth the.
Okay. Course fees for the junior high electives. You could add materials fees for the shop and foods
yeah,
classes.
I'd prefer not to do
Right.
that.
Student fees for business courses.
That's elective
It's the-
stuff, right?
At the high school, yes, and
Yeah,
then
I'd prefer not.
same thing, foods and advanced foods.
Those are,
Dan, why not?
those feel like nickels and dimes. And we've got a raised student fees piece, we've got a raised student fees piece, registration, tech, athletic, band, drama, lunch. And if it's course-related, if it's truly in-school course-related, I just don't feel like it's right, do you?
Well, the other ones are too. I mean,
The vast
band is, tech is.
And there's fees for those.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about being equitable, so.
Okay.
And to be
Let's
honest,
just think about those a
many
little
high
bit.
schools, if not all high schools, have fees for courses.
Okay.
In some places, they took them away over the last few years because they just were difficult to manage administratively. But now they're adding them back in many cases, and so the kids are paying for the food they eat or consume in the class effectively. So-
But Dan, I agree. Look at it holistically with all of those registration fees and stuff and see what
What
we
kind
come
of
up
fees
with.
are we talking about? I mean, what dollar amount?
I gotta remember, what's the dollar amount you gave? $10 or?
You mean?
No.
Well,
$20.
per class or whatever.
Hold on one second.
Maureen has a number she put in there for,
Just have to find it. Yeah, it was $10 a class.
For all of these?
All
for each of those, yes.
All of those extra elective type of things, yeah.
Okay.
But when you have here, like, add student fees for art classes, is that all the schools or just the high school?
That's it, those are at the high school.
These are
Everything
all,
else is the high school except the one that specifically
That says junior high electives.
okay, so all of these are high school?
Yes.
Okay.
And one thing that Kathy had asked me to look at was a club fee. If we decide not to eliminate some of those clubs, just adding a club fee.
Any idea what that would be?
I think you were in the $10
Oh, I
range.
just have to find it, that's all. Was that?
Were you in the $10 range?
Yeah, it was $10. That's what we were
$10.
looking at.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was $10 per club. And,
Oh, I'm sorry.
District-wide, or was that just at the high school?
At the high school, I think is what the question
Clubs?
was, right?
District-wide was my
District-wide?
request.
Okay.
okay. We have a very long.
I know.
While she's going through there, so,
Okay,
again,
thank you.
we talked about the no longer waive band athletic fees for fee waiver students already. And then no longer waive TCD activity fees for fee waiver students. So a student who wanted to go to the tech center would still have to pay their full way, you know, which is pretty significant.
I'd like to consider a fee reduction in those cases if we could. But
And what is the percentage increase in the student fees?
What the board has traditionally done in the past was increase the student fees by the difference in the operating expense per pupil from the AFR. So for last year, that was 5.88%. There are a few in that $105,000 number that I've increased more than that. One, for example, is parking, increased from 75 to, I believe, 125. So at the March 23rd board meeting is when you have historically approved fees. We can wait, obviously. I know that the high school likes to get that information out to the parents as soon as possible, but we don't have to do it at the March meeting. But I'll get into all the detail of that at the March meeting. And, I mean, you'll see $137,000 worth of revenue enhancements here. I'm gonna make the assumption that you're not going to approve all of these. So that's why I only put in $120,000 on the other,
Maureen, in the past, when we've had to consider those fee increases, you gave us comparables from other districts. Can you do that again?
yeah, I have that.
Okay,
Somebody else already did it, thankfully, this year.
okay, thank you.
So the club, if we did a $10 club fee for all clubs, it's gonna be somewhere in the range of $7,000 to $8,000.
The next list?
All right. Again, reduce administrative and custodial cell phones. I mean, there's some reduction there.
I did have a question on that.
I'm sorry.
On that one list we had last month, it was $8,100, and this.
It was actually $18,000 if we just eliminated all of those costs. Now, for our custodial staff, for instance, you know, there's a pretty significant time, safety issue from the fact if you can't get a hold of the principal because where are they in the building, you know, you need to be able to get hold of them. If this principal needs to get a hold of me, and for instance, you know, those
This is
issues are
just based on a
such.
different number of phones.
These are based on just simply eliminating those,
That's
for instance,
losing
that
two phones, one based on the,
custodial RIF and
And
an
director.
administrative loss.
But then those are phones then that they're entirely allowed to use personally, and they, you know, just, so it becomes their phone in terms of their use.
in some cases, I know a few administrators at least who carry a personal one.
Who have a personal cell phone.
Personal and a work
Some
phone.
do.
I would say the vast majority of us do not, though.
Okay. I would, you know, on that, you know, I think the per phone rate, if I remember from the bills, is like $42 a phone.
Somewhere around that.
Hold on, let me see if I can find it.
So, I mean,
Well, don't hold on, talk amongst yourselves, that sounds right.
I would suggest capping the reimbursement on that at $30 and not.
And Dan, we've shot that around. I'm gonna be honest with you, then it makes our personal phone subject to FOIA, and I don't think anybody is comfortable with that.
There's no administrator who would take the issue. They'd say, I don't have a phone. And if you want to get a hold of me, give me a phone. If you don't want to get a hold of me, don't give me a phone.
All right, so, but if they use it for the most part as their phone, isn't it all subject to FOIA anyway?
For right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it is
But-
presently.
Right,
Yeah.
but if a person, but as Maureen said, many of the administrators have a personal cell phone, and that isn't. And so if you're asking them to use their personal cell phone for work, all of their personal phone calls are now subject to FOIA. And at least what the administrator simply said is not going to do that. Not gonna happen.
Well, you know, then say out loud, I struggle with that FOIA question personally, intensely on everything I do, especially with email. But,
Administrative
I
phone's
eat my-
$42 a month.
I eat my phones.
Custodial phone's $20 a month.
I eat my phone for work. I mean, I just eat my phone.
And how many are there? You've got those numbers. How many?
Yeah, I don't have it on here.
Every administrator, every custodian.
Yeah, every administrator.
Every
so
tech
there's
support
11
staff.
administrators, sorry.
Yeah.
You know, Dan, I don't think they can't leave them at work like you can, because there's, you know, there's just all kinds of outside of school hours, things that they're involved in, and there's the whole safety and security issue regarding
Yeah, but it sounds like it's
The
a,
bill-
And I want to
buildings
point
and-
out also, we
it's a
rewrote.
FOIA thing. It's not a,
Well, we rewrote an
Oh,
emergency management plan that also incorporated the cell phones into that plan.
right.
yeah.
You know,
I mean, we could talk about it more, but I think.
Oh, yeah, that's
it's-
fine. I just, that's fine. But, I mean, okay. We gotta find a way to cap reimbursements so that that stuff doesn't continue to eat us up. But for now, leave it alone.
Eliminate printing the copies of the public packet, just make them available on the web, and
We should do
we
that now.
clearly spend more than $500 on that.
We should do that now.
Well, we got to make sure that they're there before the meetings then, because right now they're not there before
The
the
public
meetings.
packet, yeah, agreed.
Can do
They're
that.
not there, so.
No, they're not, because we wait and put it up there with the
Right.
financial information, which isn't approved until the board
No,
meeting.
so,
So we
exactly.
can't put it all there.
No, you can't put the
Prior to.
financial information there, but
Right.
you can put the public packet that
Right.
people have in their hands out there. And you can put the financial information out there
And for as much as if we're
subsequent.
in this building, in this space, you could put it up on that overhead, couldn't you? For the purposes of the room? or
What's
no?
that?
The financial piece that can't be on the website?
Well, you wouldn't
Well, we
want to do it
We
until it's
put it on the
approved.
website after it's
Oh, okay,
approved.
sorry.
Yeah, it's approved.
Well, to the extent that that is $500, I would like to get public input on that, since you've got people sitting here with copies in their hands. And I just think that would be something that we could talk about.
All
I
right.
mean, that's,
Again, send the district-wide faculty newsletter out by email. The disadvantage is we have, custodial staff and food service workers, for instance, who really don't have access to a computer during the workday and don't get that information unless, they choose to go look, and, that's, again, eliminate the junior high newsletter, that's Panther Prints.
that one up, if we back up to that one,
Yes.
could that be anything like backpack mail for people that don't have email? You could do
We can do that.
instead,
Sure.
and then the faculty that do have the,
Right.
Well, couldn't you just do the newsletter and send it out via email?
Well, we do, but again, there are some people who just don't have email,
Yeah, but if they want,
Faculty.
can't they ask colleagues for it if they,
potentially.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I moved along too far. The Panther
Oh,
prints.
well, again, a big piece of that is there's a stipend involved in doing that.
Yeah, we can talk about that. I personally am not inclined to eliminate Panther prints. I think that's a
what did you say
Sorry,
again?
Dan, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, we can talk about that some more, but I'll just say out loud, I'm personally not inclined to eliminate that.
Well, again, we can have that, but
Yeah.
we eliminated the high school one in 1985, so.
Understood,
Because that's mailed home,
understood.
the Panther prints.
No,
No,
it's
No,
just
it comes home in the
circulated,
back.
yeah, it's circulated.
that's just
Through the school.
circulated through the students. That's the student newspaper.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm thinking of something else, okay.
Again, eliminate the police officer, public meetings,
Yes.
I could
if-
do that, other than when we have a specific need, when there's a need, but I could get on that.
Yeah, the only question I had with that was if there was, like tonight, there's a very large crowd, or if you have one of the, where it's gonna be a hot topic, then I think obviously we have the ability to request that ahead of time if we have a feeling that it might be needed for, room management or whatever.
Yeah.
But for the most part, no, we don't need it.
Again, the next one would be negotiated, but you could just simply try to get all the unions to agree to direct deposit. You'd save some money. And again, there's some staff time to be saved there beyond just that cost. Field trip transportation, again, this was one the teachers were very against, actually, adding this to the list, and that's why it's not on the first list, but have the field trip transportation costs borne entirely by parents. So whatever the cost of the bus is, it has to be paid by the students going on the field trip.
Well, and that's the one I said I got a call about, because is that in a particular school? Because I know that a lot of times that when we get our
We
sheets.
often
that-
have kids, they pay something sometimes, but they don't cover the entire cost of the transportation. So we're saying that they would
But they
cover
might be
all
paying
the transportation.
Ticket price
The
to get
ticket
in.
price to
Yeah.
get into the museum or whatever.
No,
it
I
is.
know, but sometimes
Not for-
that cost is there, but it's not district-wide that is included?
$6,000 is district-wide.
Yeah. So. Again, eliminate third grade accelerated math. That was something we added this year. So
I would be inclined to
that
say no.
effectively,
Yeah.
that saves a halftime teacher effectively.
I
No.
would be inclined
But
to
we
say
only
no
have
on
it at
that too.
Manning, we do not have it at Miller.
Yes, you do.
We do? Okay.
Yes. Reduce the certified nurse position.
And I'm uncomfortable with that one.
in hire RNs, I will say
Really
that
uncomfortable with that one.
there are many
I've had
school
two
districts
incidences
that don't
with my
have
children when
any
there's been a nurse not
certified
on staff.
nurse.
And it's an
Diane.
uncomfortable position.
But there would be nurses, they just would not
But
be
but it's
certified
.2,
school.
which is what, in effect?
What we would hire is 2 RNs, so each building would have a full-time RN,
Would be a nurse
as
would be-
opposed to 1 nurse between the 2 buildings.
But it's .2. What's
We would
point-
still leave the certified nurse .2 for those very few IEP-related services that require a certified nurse.
That doesn't, typical schools have a school of this staff?
Almost, really, unless, as certified nurses retire, they're not being replaced. There are districts that don't have any certified nurse now.
There's
This
his-
is a
there-
WTA
there's-
position?
Yes, it's a WTA position.
So wouldn't there be any, grievances about reducing it and basically replacing it with RNs?
No, I mean, right now, the RNs that we have on staff right now are part of the Westville union.
Yeah.
We have one certified nurse right now who's part of the WTA union. So
There's
it's a
history.
matter of filling or not filling a position, which is a management right in either contract.
Right.
But you said there's one WTA, is that the one?
There's
that's on-
one, right now, we have
certified
one
nurse.
certified nurse.
Right.
For the whole district.
Right.
Right? Effectively, what we're saying is that we would reduce the certified nurse position to handle only those issues that require a certified nurse. And for all other things, we would use an RN like we already do at the high school and we already do it at the junior high. And effectively, that saves us $46,000.
So again, I go back to, is this one person in the WTA? And
Yes.
is that,
Yes, it's one certified position. So there's one nurse who's paid on the teacher salary scale to be a nurse. The other nurses are paid as RNs in an hourly rate.
Well, I'm with Diane, I'm not in favor of reducing that.
I guess I,
It would still, but you guys understand there would still be, the services would still be there for the students.
So
And then
I,
when it requires a school-certified nurse for the purposes of, state requirements.
Basically tied
there
to an
would be-
IEP.
Right.
right,
Elementary
So it would
buildings are
not
unique
be-
buildings with a lot of history, and
Yeah.
there's history with those kids, especially young kids. This one becomes hard to articulate against the cost thing. It becomes hard to articulate. But what is real and what we can't quantify is the risk that's associated with losing the knowledge of those kids all the time.
the kids move on,
Because we
think
have
that-
RNs at the junior high and the high school.
right, and I think we're
that
just
has-
trying to be consistent.
I'm
So,
gonna have to
and-
say I agree with this one too. in that,
Well,
Not
because
sure I
for the sake of
understand.
Moving on, we can move on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're not making any decisions tonight.
Eliminate the accompanist at the junior high or eliminate the accompanist at the high school.
And I think that would compromise this class.
Talked about those.
Yeah.
Reduce one of the high school counselors. Right now, we have 2. We'd only have 1. Until a few years ago, we only had 1.
Say no.
We
say no.
can't do that.
Eliminate all the elementary club stipends. Again, eliminate those elementary clubs. We talked about that.
So goes back to the club, if we had a fee then we wouldn't
Obviously,
have
if you
to.
eliminated the club, then that $7,000 to $8,000 number I just gave you wouldn't exactly be $7,000 or $8,000.
Right.
But if we had a fee for those clubs,
Yeah, but a $10 fee isn't gonna cover the cost of those clubs. This is just elementary clubs,
right,
on this list
I
right
know,
here.
I know, it's elementary.
It's only that's 11 grand for only elementary clubs, so your fee would have to be in the $100 range.
But what here is it's all elementary clubs.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, that's a pretty big,
Yes, it is.
we have
Big
to,
statement.
and it's a big issue in the district if you eliminate all your clubs, so,
It's elementary, though. We're not talking about junior
I
high
know,
or high school at this
I know.
particular number.
I know.
All right, eliminate this snowball sponsor. All right. Reduce the high school secretarial staff, so you combine the attendance secretary and the athletic secretary effectively into one position.
I have concerns with that.
So, again, close the swimming pool to outside clubs and/or renegotiate with the Westmont Swim Club that, their rental has to absolutely cover the entire cost of the pool.
When does that lease come up?
I believe it's a one-year lease, but I.
It was a
I have to
3-year
look
lease
at-
when we signed it.
Yeah, I
Close.
believe there's 1 year left on it.
1 year left
Yeah.
on it. So they have is the 1 year that's left this year?
No, I believe it's next year. I'll
Next
check.
year is the 1 year that's left.
I'll check.
And again, you could go back to them and say, here's the deal, either you help us or, you know when we're done,
Yeah.
we're not gonna move
What other
forward.
outside clubs, are there other outside clubs?
No,
No, that's the only one.
Oh, okay.
Cut industrial arts, for instance, at the junior high, and simply replace it with a study hall.
Well, with an elective.
You're cutting an elective and simply give them a study hall.
Well,
So if they take that elective, instead of an
They-
elective, they get a study hall,
Couldn't they choose
they
another?
could choose
elective?
another elective.
potentially. Assuming it doesn't have an impact on staffing.
There's also TCD, right?
This is junior high.
This is
She's
junior high.
junior high?
There's no.
This is
TCD.
just
Junior high.
junior high.
There's nothing else, music and.
Okay. Eliminate all the junior high school clubs.
You know,
Again.
can I ask industrial arts, how many students take that at the junior high and the high school? Do we know?
I
Or
have
can
no
we get
idea
that number?
offhand. We can give you those numbers.
Okay,
Maureen, did you get that?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
thank you.
looking out there to see if there's.
I know, but it's.
Okay, just, we've got time.
Right. Eliminate again, the junior high sports or raise participation fees to cover the costs. So,
So now, again, this is all junior high clubs and all junior high sports.
right.
I can't do that.
So, right. Yeah. Cut 612 reading specialist. A couple years ago, we hired a literacy specialist to work at the junior high and high school, similar to the 5 FTE of people we have working at the elementary level. So they have 1 FTE at the high school and junior high together. And I think that position has been a very strong position, has done a lot of positive things for the district.
What, I mean, what if you went to the reading specialist, 6 through 8, 6, 7, 8?
I mean, made it a halftime position?
Yeah.
You could, you'd save half that cost.
Because the impact, I mean, obviously there's impact at the high school. I won't say that there's not impact at the high school.
I think
but-
there's
but
great
but-
impact at the high school in this particular case. We've made a lot, but here's the issue, if you hire a part-time person,
Well, if you're working with a reading specialist at the high school, though, doesn't it indicate that you've missed them in the junior high?
No.
it depends. Some of us,
Okay.
I mean,
How many
That's
people?
fine.
many of our kids are,
Well, how many?
transfer in.
Help me.
Over the course of the high school career, probably about
Because our
15%.
mobility rate
Is down.
is substantially down.
Well, because of the economy, but in general, we've had a very high mobility rate over time. And those kids are still in our system right now. But if you make it a part-time position, first, it's very hard to keep good part-time people.
Right.
And so the person's gonna be teaching, some courses and be part-time, and there's a loss of effectiveness there, I think, beyond the part-time. I mean, you can do it part-time, but there's a certain loss when the person also has their own class load, because then they're not available to work, for instance, with a teacher who wants them to come and work with them, they're not available to work with all their classes because they have their own class load. And so then people go, no, if I can't do it with all my classes, I'm not gonna do it. And then it just becomes less effective. It's just much less effective at part-time.
Well, but we've had that same conversation with the companies and different things too, about whether we're gonna take somebody from full-time to part-time.
Absolutely, but a support staff person who's playing the piano in a choral program.
I'm not
is
trying to
different
say,
than-
I'm not trying to say that, I'm just saying, when you're saying, keeping a full-time person, I'm just saying that we obviously have a huge range in front of us.
Yes, but I would, again, just to articulate that, the reading specialist who's a certified staff member, who's taught and has a history of having taught effectively as a reading or language arts teacher and is working with other teachers as a professional, I mean, that's a very different situation than, an hourly employee. Not that the accompanist doesn't bring value, but it's a very different.
I'm not
A very
tying it-
different conversation.
I'm not tying it to, that's not what I'm saying.
Right. And then, again, the potential librarian cuts, you could cut one of the certified librarians and have one work between the two buildings, or, again, have one cut and one work between the junior high and high school. And
So right now, we have 2 certified librarians, one in each elementary building, right?
Yes, we do.
And we've had those positions as certified librarians for the last 2 years, is that correct?
That's correct.
So prior to that, we had aides.
And prior to that, you simply had an aide, yes.
Okay.
And I would say the program was, exponentially different. They came in, they checked out a book, they got a story read to them effectively. There was no instruction.
Understood.
Okay?
I think Linda Hull's, presentation at our last board meeting kind of spoke to the level we've reached, in terms of library science and technology.
Reduce selective administrative positions. Effectively, this would take both elementary principals and both secondary assistant principals from 12 months to 10 months.
So that's 2 elementary principals and both assistant principals? at
Yes.
Junior high and high school. That's what the 4,
That would be horrible.
Correct.
I don't know how they could get everything done.
Can we back up to the librarian just for a second? For the high school and the junior high, so Ms. Hool is retiring, so is one of the, is that included in this sharing the junior high and high school? Or is her position totally different than certified librarian?
She is the certified librarian at the junior high.
Okay, so,
So if you don't replace her.
so she would not be replaced?
So if you don't replace her, then they share one person between the junior high and the high school. And I think that both principals would tell you that there'd be a very big loss there.
okay.
Okay, eliminate the director of technology. Again, that's a part-time position. But again, if you eliminate that, when I got here, one of the other administrators was assigned as the technology director, and, technology just simply didn't work. That was, I think that, again, Nancy has brought a great deal of success for the district, and that if you're going to eliminate that position, it's going to be tough to have one of the other administrators pick those duties up.
I just want to comment. I can remember when not only did technology not work, but the buildings didn't communicate with each other. The parents didn't have access to Skyward. I mean, the technology improvements have just been phenomenal. So I just want to mention that because it's just been.
And again, Nancy has, shepherded those processes along.
Absolutely. And I think, too, that there's been changes, Maureen, in the human resource.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
So this is one of those things that you eliminate and you go backwards, you
Sure,
put an
absolutely.
end to the forward progress of.
Absolutely. No different than the curriculum director. If you eliminate either of them, you're not going to make as much forward progress, and you risk going backwards. Cut the assistant principal at the junior high school to part-time. That was, again, a recommendation. That was the situation many years ago, and it was changed to be a full-time position. And, again, to have 2 administrators in a middle school is not uncommon. In fact, it would be very common to have only 1.5 people there, but, there's a savings if you did it theoretically. Eliminate the soft sports at the high school and just keep simply varsity athletics. I think if you look in Steve Carr's notes, he'll articulate if you eliminated the sophomore program, you'd probably get kicked out of our conference. So, there's a positive there. And then again, eliminate the dean position. I've articulated before that I think that would be an incredible mistake. He's also the athletic director, and the position was eliminated in 1985 or 86 as part of budget cuts, and they brought it back the next year. It's about the only thing they did bring back because of, the fact that you simply can't eliminate it until the principal and assistant principal are already working 14-hour days, that, they're going to just cover those things.
There's a retirement there this year, right?
He is retiring, correct?
So is there a savings in the replacement?
Right, but his savings of the fact that he retired is already worked into your model.
Okay.
So that's assuming that you wouldn't replace him with somebody at
So,
MA5.
okay, MA5.
Right.
Okay, I got you.
Because that,
It's not an assumption at MA five.
Okay.
There's not? So what's in there for that level?
85 to 90,000
Okay.
replacement value.
Because the number that was.
67 here, which would
Well,
be
the save-
MA5 plus a stipend.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right, that's what's in the model.
Right.
You're right. I apologize.
Sorry. I like it when you say that. Doesn't happen very often.
Happy with it.
For them,
Okay, so.
Okay, so we've
Wait,
gone
wait,
through.
But at that, because the number that was for the dean position in last meeting's thing was 109.
that was his actual
Right,
salary.
so-
But again,
so-
what I asked Maureen to do,
At
to make sure
MA5,
these
there's
numbers
a
are-
net saving, right?
yes,
Okay.
but not really, because that's also included into
In the model.
into the model already. So
Can't count it twice.
the
with
changes that we
I'm
made,
with you. Yep, it's okay.
when we went through these again, I asked Maureen to make sure that the real savings, not the cost of the position, for
Yep.
instance, but based on, how people bump other people with tenure, et cetera, all of these things, these are the real numbers the district would realize in savings,
I got you.
because that's what they have to work from.
I'm slow, I catch on though.
Okay?
I have a couple of questions. On our sheets, could you go over again what that course selection enrollment savings is, that line of that 150,000?
The vast majority of that is based on savings at the high school. And again, just based on every year, class enrollments are different. And so, for instance, this year, art is down 3 sections, band is up 4, choir is flat, business is up 2, the co-op is down 2. Industrial ed, there's 1 less section, there's 1 less section of photography. If you add all those up, that savings plus, because we're going to a change at the junior high to have blocked reading language arts courses, there's a savings there in a half a position. And then right now, it's not required that we're gonna have to offer bilingual instruction next year, and we currently have a part-time bilingual person. And so we could eliminate that. So that's basically the 2.2 FTE in savings there.
So this is already like kind of done, right, because of what we know for next year?
Based on our enrollment, correct?
Based on, because I
Course
know they did
selections,
the
yes.
course selections. Okay, so that's one thing. I know that this is a hot topic, and I'm just going to ask this question in terms of class sizes. I know that's really hot, and I know it's across every district. So what we have in front of us is potentially 28 for K through 2 and 30 for 3 through 5, or 30 for K through 5. And then, obviously, the whole grade center discussion, which we haven't had. What are our, to the extent there are, what are the numbers at the junior high and the high school for class sizes? Would they be affected at all? Because this is just the elementary
Right,
schools.
because the high school course numbers and the junior high numbers are based, again, those course enrollment numbers up above we just talked about.
Right.
And so we try to make sure that classes don't go below 20. I mean, we like to have at least 20 students enroll for a course. Now, again, it depends. Right now, in the science courses, most of the science courses are in the mid-20s. Well, there are only 24 seats in a science lab. So you can't have more than 24 kids in a science class. You can put 32 in a French class. And you try to figure out how many cuts you can make to, build the least number of sections you can. But the number varies wildly. I'm sure Grant would be very eager to point out to you that his class sizes are very large in comparison to, other departments. And so, it's not, I don't know of anybody who says, okay, this is what we're gonna have as our average class size and then break there, because it has to fit into a bigger schedule. And part of it also tries to make sure that, you make as many people whole as you build that schedule. And again, you're never sure exactly what you're gonna have until you actually run the master schedule. So now you have to take all these course requests and then determine how many kids you're gonna really have.
Sure. I guess what I'm saying is if something that we're looking at is class sizes, being a unit district, shouldn't we be looking throughout the whole?
Clearly,
and-
we've raised
and-
the average, we've eliminated many of the smaller classes at the high school already. Where a class in the past, if you had 10 kids who wanted to signed up, the class might run. Whereas now, in the past few years, we've said if there aren't at least 18 kids choosing that one course, that they don't get it. And so effectively have pushed the class size at the high school up considerably.
Effectively, I mean,
It's a different
the misnomer here
Yeah,
is,
I understand
the
that.
misnomer here,
Yeah.
if you will, is when we say class size increased,
Right.
what, the appropriate, sort of descriptor
The
there is
maximum.
probably self-contained class sizes,
Yeah.
right? Because everything else, junior high and senior high, is demand-driven.
Right.
If there's kids, we do it. If
Right.
there's not kids, we don't do
I
it.
get that.
So, so the title on this one
Yeah.
is really just about self-contained class sizes, which is elementary. And so, I mean, yeah, it's something we need to look at.
Well, and I guess that goes to, I understand that it's course selection and driven, but is there some, you're saying now that, they have to have 20. I mean, the last thing I want to do is like cut anything at the high school. But what I'm saying is if we've got, if we're even contemplating having 30 kids in a kindergarten, shouldn't we be looking across the district for
Sure.
that? I'm just saying that I don't see that on here.
Well, eventually, and I guess that gets to where do we go next?
Right.
Well, for instance, AP Human Geography is a course that was offered at the high school in the registration process. 15 students chose to take it. 13 students chose AP Human Geography 2. Neither of those courses are going to be offered, all right? In European history, 24 students chose it. There'll be one section, all right? Sociology has 50 students. There'll be 2 sections. Economics has 144 students, right? And so, fundamentals of law have 30, there'll be 1 section. So there will be classes, Chicago history, for instance, there's 65 kids. That might only be 2 sections.
Okay.
Those, at the high school, you can't make a unilateral, okay, we're gonna raise class sizes to 28. It's all very demand-driven, and part of it figures out how it fits in the schedule, how it relates to other courses in the schedule, because if you have a bunch of singletons that are only being offered once, you gotta spread them out over the whole day, and, those all have an impact on the final number of students who are actually gonna be in the class.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm not asking to have any courses cut and anything, it's just, it just pains me to see 30 kids in kindergarten.
Well, let's do
Dr.
this.
I mean,
and that's obviously
Yeah, but
part of the bigger
let's do
question.
this, and let's talk about where we go next,
Yeah.
which is next week, and where we talk about a new model.
Right.
Okay.
We identified, if we look at option A, let's just focus on option A for a second.
I do have a question on class sizes before we move on. Can you remind us what the current class size structure is?
Currently, right now, prior to the beginning of this year, we limited 25 K2 and 28 3-5. If you remember this year, we had a second grade class that was going to go over 25 for the first day of school, and I asked the board at that point in time what they wanted to do because of the fiscal situation, and the board said, don't split the class. So we didn't.
Right,
So we have primary classes that are over 25.
okay.
So that's one reason for moving it to the 28 is the limit, because that's effectively what we're doing now,
Okay,
all right?
thank you.
So for the next model that we look at, and Linda, this is going to get back to going to 2013 as opposed to 2015. Let's run, if we could, have PMA run a model for us based on option A. We identified about $50,000 of cuts off this list 1.
Option A with the baseline or option A with less the G?
Well, yeah, I'll get to that, but I mean, just in terms of the cuts,
Okay.
right? Option A cuts and revenue enhancement and stuff like that. Let's run an option A model with cuts that incorporate the list 1, less the things that we've already said are no, which I think add up to about $50,000. So there's probably about $610,000 of cuts in list 1 at this point. The course selection savings, obviously, we should incorporate. Let's run option A at 28 K2 and 33 through 5, and then let's run the revenue enhancements as you presented them. Stick those in the model for year 1, and then take them out. Do it, I would suggest, and Linda and others I'm fine with, I think we should do it as baseline less the GSA. Assume that we don't have the GSA, and then see what that impact is. But in addition to that, Maureen, if you, based on what you hear between here and there, think that there's
all
some
gonna-
money that we
we're all-
recover?
I'm much more worried that we're going to lose more.
More? Okay, then.
I'm worried about that. Who knows? Tomorrow might be sunshine and roses and
Yeah.
the birds will sing, but
And
I
you
don't
know what
anticipate
else?
that.
I think we can also include the first, based on this conversation, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, not 1, 2, second through 6, 7. Well, there's some of them, I can't even do it in a row. some of them on the second page.
Yeah.
We could add into the model too. I
So
know there's
let's add
still
in-
ongoing discussion on some,
Yeah,
but number 2, 3,
yep.
4, or no, 4 was still in question?
Yeah, 4 is in question. So let's do
5 is
2,
a go-
3,
is a go?
5.
6,
2, 3, 5, well, that's negotiated, right?
6 has to be
Yeah,
negotiated.
so let's do 2,
Okay.
3, 5,
7,
7.
um,
I don't know if I want to,
it's probably as
yeah, I
far
don't
as
know
we
if I want to
got.
touch anything
Yeah.
else right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's run that model and see what it spits out at 2013 for us. Because just based on rough numbers, if we've got 625 in cuts, 150 in course selection savings, and 120, you know, we may be, you know, sort of close to where we need to be. And then we can have more conversations as we go further.
And
But-
again, yeah, we're having a meeting next week,
Yeah.
Tuesday. And then the
David,
following
no
Tuesday.
decisions have been made tonight, okay? No decisions.
Can I ask a question, Maureen? There was a discussion about you talking to the ISBE. Is there going to be like a presentation, or are you going to come and, what does that entail?
You know, right now, I just met with them on Thursday. So they
Okay.
have an alternative model to PMA that does budget projections. My only problem with their model is that it includes the working cash fund, because that's how the state board defines whether or not you need a deficit reduction plan. So it includes it in there. I need to find a way to work the working cash fund back out, because for us, that's specified for projects. So it's not working capital as we would think of the rest of the operating funds. So if I can figure that out, then I can present it on the 16th, or it might take me until the 23rd.
Okay. Just wanted to see what that meant.
Yeah,
That
it's
was
just,
something
it's
you
an
were-
alternative to the PMA.
Okay.
Several districts have started to use it just to have a couple different sets of numbers to look
Yeah,
at.
okay. Anything else on this topic? No? Okay, so we will talk again next week. Let's go to public comment. I have a card in front of me, Westmont Teachers Association.
Can I just make a comment? Just in case anybody in the audience is really interested in this, tomorrow at noon, Governor Quinn is doing his kind of State of the Budget address. There's a website called budgetillinois.gov that should probably have a summary on there tomorrow. So if, you know, if you're so inclined to listen to it and see how the state of Illinois is doing, it's a much more bleak picture, just to warn you, than what you're hearing tonight. So it's billions and billions of dollars in debt. Okay, so if anybody's interested, if you're a numbers person and you.
You know, the other thing too
This
is
kind of stuff.
I've seen things that where, you know, we could start trying to talk to our people about contacting their state constituents about bills and stuff like that. That would be a really good thing for us as a district to do, to the extent that people feel like they can do something. I mean, Illinois is in bad shape, but to the extent that we can write our legislators. She doesn't need that, but.
Good evening. My name is Grant Sarr. I serve as president of the Westmont Teachers Association. Usually I'm here to celebrate our student successes or have students performed for you. And unfortunately tonight we're here to continue this difficult and challenging conversation. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of the WTA Executive Board at their direction and the direction of the members. And they feel strongly that you should hear directly from us. So we're here tonight to share with you some of our considerations as they pertain to cost containment for next year. As you know, we've been involved with some conversations with the administrative team, and we have gone back and considered the list of items that have been presented, and we've had great conversation between Vice President Paul Rath, myself, and the Executive Board. We've looked at this list, and we have made suggestions based on a philosophical rationale that looks at the expenditure reductions that are necessary based on the PMA models and the uncertainty of state funding. We believe that reduction should begin with items furthest from daily instruction and students, and that the burden of these reductions should be spread across the spectrum of the district programs and employee groups. And certainly we took into consideration that array of reductions were already made for last school year, 09-10. And certainly we believe that these reductions should be purposeful and aligned with this rationale. The historical context that we bring to examining the list of cuts is that certainly for years the district has had financial projections that have consistently shown an exhaustion of fund balances. However, there have been many things done over the years to keep those projections from becoming reality. And certainly while downward projections have been seen for years, it really wasn't until last year that we made significant cuts based on those projections. And certainly in the context of the CPI, we understand what 0.1 means. We understand the numbers that Dan, you were alluding to earlier in the meeting. And so in that context, we have made a list of suggested cuts. Know that as we had our 2 meetings with the administration, we left our last meeting making suggestions in the context of $1.2 to $1.65 million. So there are several cuts in here that do affect students directly, that knowing potentially another direction of the board, we would certainly recommend removing immediately from this list. However, to begin with administrative reductions, again, in keeping with the philosophy that we aren't going to overburden one particular group or program, we would suggest that the curriculum director position be reduced to 50%. In looking at, there is conversation about the dean. In looking at the replacement of the dean, certainly there could be a cost savings there. However, we also believe that we need to work hard to hire quality candidates that are less qualified than Master's Step 5 so that we can work within the PMA model and realize some more savings beyond the PMA projections there. And then finally, the other item from the list is to accept the 12.5% salary reduction from the superintendent. And again, all these items are on the list that you've already discussed. There's nothing new here. However, we have suggested different reductions in terms of what we're choosing and different levels. In terms of support staff, we looked at approximately $157,000 of reductions, reducing one secretarial position to 50%, eliminating the tech support position, French fries, reducing the custodian, reducing building checks only by 50%, looking at that number, reducing it only by half, and then not filling the 2 positions that were mentioned earlier, the seasonal grounds position and the energy manager position. In terms of certified staff, again, you discussed earlier the elimination of the junior high foreign language program. That recommendation came from the foreign language staff. So we would recommend that particular reduction. Sharing one certified librarian between the junior high and high school, while that is certainly not an ideal situation, we have a moment to temporarily realize some savings through attrition. And then hire the part-time social workers, again, which was discussed earlier this evening. Staff extra duty reductions. We would suggest beginning with 50% of the PBIS stipends. Again, not to completely eliminate a program. Eliminate the assistant yearbook advisor, reduce the number of driver's ed sections, the ACT prep course, and we can look down that list. A number of those things were already discussed this evening. Items, again, depending on the direction of the board, that we had a challenging time deciding on because, again, we were working in the context of $1.2 to $1.6 million, was reducing eliminating all the elementary clubs except for the stipends, except for the supervisions, lunch, recess, and bus duty, and then not eliminating but reducing the junior high club sports and the high school frosh soft sports, all of those by 50%. And then finally eliminating the Panther and Prince newsletter and the summer school programming. So again, there we see reductions rather than wholesale eliminations of programs. The non-salary items, quite honestly, we included almost every non-salary item that was listed, with the exception of the field trip expenses, again, a student-centered expense that we believe in. The Geese Police, which was mentioned, the Thanksgiving feast, the conversation about cell phones, we would suggest trying to explore ways to find a 15% reduction in expenditure there. And again, other items that have already been previously discussed this evening. If we add that up, we get to $753,147. There are some other options that we did discuss as an executive board. I all of these cuts are painful and burdensome to us all, and we'd like to have to not recommend any of them. However, there are a few others that were discussed, and they include the complete discontinuation of the curriculum director and technology director. However, in this scenario, we would, again, knowing that those responsibilities would be shifted to the principals, suggest that we do not reduce any secretarial positions. And then finally, something that was discussed in some of our reduction meetings was the complete elimination of junior high sports or finding sponsors. So really, the overall savings of these compared to what we lose isn't really something that we would like to recommend, but it is something that we did discuss, which brings those savings to $817,725. Combined with the maximum new revenue that you see in your packet, if we go back to these revenue expenditure considerations, the $136,000 there is of the new revenue, there are a number of items that don't have a fixed dollar amount to them yet. At the point of our discussions when we left the table, there were the idea of 2 additional cell towers, reducing technology subscriptions based on usage, further supply budget reductions, exploring ways to increase revenue generation from South School, explore sponsorship possibilities for athletic programs, determine if the current tax rate is adequate to support our current programming, be more vigilant about energy conservation, and increase grant applications. Some of those things we'd never be able to affix a number to, but there are certainly things that we would recommend exploring. Bringing together the reductions in the revenues, in the first set of recommendations, we come to $890,000, and in the second set, $954,000. I think it's important to note that the association and their members are willing to step up. Of the cuts in Plan A, almost $300,000 of that money is from salaries and funds that are paid to WTA members. And in Plan A, 75% of those cuts, of that $890,000, is in salaries, whether it be WTA, maintenance, support, and that is the biggest part of our budget. And we do understand that that's where the money is. It is our intent to try to preserve the programs that we have at the quality that we have. So we would ask that you would consider some of the following things as the conversations continue over the next several weeks. Number one, our district clearly has a history of fiscal responsibility. This is demonstrated by the fact that we haven't had a tax rate referendum since 1986. If you look at the programming that we offer in our district, it's not overly rich. We don't have a wealth of opportunities or a set of opportunities that even approaches some of our neighboring schools. So we have to work together to maintain the offerings that we already have. And we certainly cannot allow the current economic downturn to hinder the long-term retention of quality teaching staff. I'm very concerned when we talk about staffing by numbers, because that ultimately means that in some positions, one year they might be 0.9, 0.8, 0.7, and those could fluctuate. And how do we truly maintain quality teaching staff in those positions? And it goes right to the last point. What are we doing to really live up to our motto, small schools, large opportunities? And, as we look at considering these cuts, we have to consider that. It's something we say, it's something that's on our stationery, and it might cost us a little bit more because, as we've talked about, economies of scale. It might cost us a little bit more to do that in our small district. Some suggestions for future action. Number one, take a measured approach to the cuts that we're going to make over time. And we've done that last year by starting with $500,000. Strongly consider if the current revenue structure will continue to support the educational programming in 201. And we heard conversation about that at the start this evening. And finally, establish a program for reinstating the items that we're going to be reducing. We've heard that some items haven't returned to programming. So as we make these decisions, what is our plan to reinstate and examine our finances and determine if they will allow these items to be returned as soon as possible? Because again, I think we can all agree that we aren't rich in administrative staff, in support staff, in programming. So the question then becomes, as we approach these cuts, how do we plan to return these items over time? So we feel that's very important. Also, we would suggest that you aggressively encourage the district stakeholders to support school funding at the state level by contacting lawmakers and the governor to support our students, to support our programs and the quality offerings that we do have. We need to continue to lay groundwork among all the stakeholders that will promote a shared vision for our district that effectively addresses our known financial and facilities needs. We need to start the conversation. If we know it's there, we cannot wait. We simply cannot wait. And finally, we have to do what it takes to work together in a manner that's student-centered and moves our district forward in a positive direction. As we look around and contemplate these tough decisions, we hope that the decisions are made in a way that can support what we have as best as we can and move the district forward. Ultimately, we need to be focused on moving forward for the sake of our students. So, you've discussed many of these things, so I, again, don't want to rehash a number of the items and go through. You've discussed them thoroughly, and you certainly have many decisions to make. I will say that some of the numbers are new to us this evening. In terms of the numbers that were presented, in terms of course selection enrollment savings. So that may change our input and conversation that we have with you at the next meeting. We don't know the details there other than what we've heard this evening. So we hope that we'll get that information, be able to process that, and then further refine our ideas as we know what your direction becomes more clear as a board. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you
Grant.
gonna make-
Yeah. Grant, can we get copies of those?
Yes, I do have a copy. I have a copy of the spreadsheet of all of the proposed items, and I'll give that to you. I will say that the original numbers that were presented to us at the first meeting are in the first column. However, I will warn you, in WTA recommendation A column, there are some items that you saw we suggested only reducing by 50%. So when you see that the number's in half, it's not noted reduce 50%, but that's where the number comes. So just watch out for that. So I will give these copies to Judy, and you can go from there. I appreciate
Well,
it.
and
As
thank
well
you.
as the,
Thank you.
as well as the PowerPoint, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, I
That'd be
can do
great.
that.
I
I can do
appreciate
that.
And obviously, you heard we haven't made any cuts.
Yes,
But-
yes.
And we're going to have more meetings, so
Right. And-
obviously your numbers would change.
Potentially. And again, we appreciate the opportunity to have been invited to the meetings with the administrators. That has not been the case in every district, and every district is going through these tough decisions. So we appreciate being at the table and having the opportunity to have that discussion. Again, I'm here tonight because the membership in the executive board feels very strongly that we, at least at this point, deliver our message directly to you.
And I think it's wonderful to see this many teachers here at, it's 10 o'clock and it's a school night. So thank you all for coming to this meeting, and thank you.
Thank you for
Grant,
the time.
Giving that to us. Thank you.
Just a quick observation that I think is fair to note at this point, in terms of what we're going to run for the next meeting. Obviously, we've talked about a number of revenue enhancements that include fees for participation fees and stuff like that kids our kids and families are going to have to probably deal with once we get through this process. But in that first core list of cuts, the only curricular cut that's noted in that first page is French and Spanish at the junior high. It's the only curricular cut that's noted. We are still a robust unit district, given our size. And, regardless of how difficult these conversations are, and they are difficult, we are going to continue to be a very fine school district on a going forward basis. So,
Yeah, and again, we're looking at having a public forum in the future. Having said that, are there any other public comments? Would you state your name, please, too?
My name is Greg Notbush, resident of Westmont, obviously, since I'm the only one here. I had a myriad of questions, and a lot of statements, but actually you've done quite a good job of answering most of the questions I think a lot of us had, especially on the financial end of things and why they are. But another thing that seems to be a problem that we really haven't talked about is generating more revenue for the schools. And obviously that revenue comes from basically us, the citizens and taxpayers of Westmont. Long time ago when we were having the discussions about South School, they had a village board meeting to talk about it, and I think it was the mayor or one of the board members had mentioned that they're really a separate entity from the school board, have nothing to do with you guys, almost a completely separate form of government. I said, doesn't that seem like a complete waste of time for us to have this meeting with the village board when they have nothing to do with the schools? That same token still applies here. I think when you're talking about trying to find different streams of revenue for the schools, you need to have a lot more conversations, or at least with the village board, because it is their job to try and bring people here into Westmont, bring more business, encourage construction, house building, businesses to come in for obviously, greater tax revenues. So again, I would encourage trying to have some kind of conversation with them or plead to them to say, hey, what are you going to do to help us increase the schools? Because people don't move to towns because, hey, the view's nice out their front window. The main reason people come to towns is because of the quality of their schools. And if the qualities of the schools here suffer, obviously people aren't going to want to come here. I can think of a handful of people actually right now who have left the village recently for better schools or better opportunities because the town's nicer and that yada, yada, yada. So anyway, that's the basic statement that I had. Also, one other thing, it is nice to have the list of proposed cuts, but also I think it would be nice to, if you want to have a public conversation about this, to also have a itemized list of the current budget to see what's in it, where the money is currently going, the things that are not being proposed to be cut. You talked about prioritizing things. There might be some things that are a huge priority to you, may not be a huge priority to us, and vice versa. So it would also be nice to post it online or.
It's on the website.
Is it on your
And the
website?
budget, there's actually, there's a state form, which I find personally fairly Byzantine, but it actually does a pretty good job. That's a true detail,
Yep.
line by line thing, fund by fund. And the thing you get lost in is all the fund level. There's so much detail
I'm
that
sure
you
there
get
is.
lost in it.
Yeah.
That said, Maureen puts together schedules that summarize that data, that are fantastic Excel-based spreadsheets that will help you on a global basis get a handle on sort of what our budget looks like by fund, operationally, and stuff like that. I'll encourage you to go online, go into the administration section of the website, and there's, there's also annual, I don't know your background, but there's the comprehensive annual financial report, which is a full accounting statement, that in the back has some amazing statistics that are worth looking at. Yeah, and in terms of equalized assessed value and enrollments and square footage by building and all this other kind of stuff. And the first 6 or 7 pages of that comprehensive report is a fantastic read in terms of understanding the history of our district and a discussion of the business that we're in and the things that we do. So go online, pull that stuff up, spend some time, because we desperately covet participation from people, and we covet it in the context of being fully informed. So get informed.
All right. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say. Again, just encourage some communication with bring the school board and the local government together to say, can we work together to try and solve this budget problem, rather than you guys being stuck by yourselves and at the mercy of, no money.
Just a plug for the village right now. We're here for free. So
Yeah, I
again,
was just gonna say that,
thank
yeah.
you to the village for that, and we're on TV as well. And I think again, they have been absolutely supportive of the district and of this board.
It's fine to be supportive, but again, you have to say that, they're donating the time and space here, and that's all well and good. But what are they doing to improve the community, to bring in more tax revenue, which, of course, most of which goes to the school? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Okay. Then the chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing personnel issues and collective bargaining.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Charleston?
Yes?
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Mrs. Lubeck?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Casey?
Yes.
And there will not be a vote tonight.
Can you grab